like to welcome Ashayana and Azutanya Dean this evening. It is a really momentous and awesome occasion here in Canada to get them up here and bring this wonderful information to us and teaching. We have, I guess, had a little bit of a manifesting group that to get Anna up here. Ashayana. And so, I knew I should have wrote something there.
Thank you all.
Comic relief
Thank you
is
all
good,
for
Monica.
coming.
Yes, yes. And thank you, Monica.
She's trying to use a private session, I think. Well, hi. I'm Azutanya, or Michael for short, and if you like it shorter, you call me Az, all right? I'm the lesser half of this duo, known as Speaker 2 in waiting. This is Speaker 1 arrived. I get to do just a little job of saying, in this situation, how totally amazed, we're just blown away to see all you people here, and particularly to find such a wonderful warm reception. I think that we could say for each other and ourselves that we haven't been anywhere on the planet where we felt instantly open to and with people that have approached us and have welcomed us and have brought the organisation to the level it's been brought to for this event. You've done just an amazing job. We're so impressed with you guys, and one of the things that never gets talked about is how we get impressed by you people. It really happens a lot more, a lot more. Anyway, the thank yous are not done because we'll continue doing that with you all the way through the weekend by way of presenting the work the best way that we know how. I don't really get to say much simply because I can't condense this in a way that does justice to the material. But what I want to say to you is that welcome to the Freedom Teachings, since that is what they are, of the Azurite Temple, Emerald Order. And what Ashana will do during the course of this weekend, and for those of you who decide to come to the round table classes the following weekend, is she will begin to introduce you to material which is pre-ancient, if you like, if you want to play the language of the spiritual movement. It's very, very old. It relates entirely to the principles of creation, the function of creation, our role in, and so on. So you'll understand that since creation is pretty damned old, then this work also is as well. The last time it existed on the planet as a body of teaching was over 210,000 years ago. The last time it existed in book forms, elements of the whole, was about 2,000 years ago, in the time of the people that you refer to as Jesus, or Jeshua, or in terms of Voyager's material, Jeshua 12, John the Baptist, and Miriam. Some of these books existed then, and it's significant that they were during the time that the reorganization and planning of what we should be taught from a spiritual and religious perspective, that the Bible left all of this material out. Why? Because it is your heritage. And why? Because it is your key to personal spiritual power. Everything that we stand for and represent, without trusting anybody or anyone, without asking anybody to believe us, or to do as we tell them because we don't, everything is about your freedom. Everything is about your right to express as a fully realized spiritual being. And in our language, as the angelic human, you were and still are, but you were created to be. As guardians of this planet, as guardians of this galaxy, and as major players in a very, very big game. Bigger than you realize now, and I hope as big as you will come to realize before the weekend's over. Anyway, that's my stuff. It is the best stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Azutanya, very much for your flattery. Okay, I would like to, again, welcome all of you here, and thank you for coming to this workshop. This is an introductory workshop on Kathara Healing. It's Kathara Healing Level 1 and an introduction to Kathara Healing Level 2, which has recently been put into the program. I say introductory, and it's kind of funny. For anybody, anyone here who has looked through the manual for the Kathara manual, you will see that an introduction in our world is rather detailed. There's a lot of information that we're going to cover. Before we get into technicals, I would like to first of all thank Monica and everyone that has participated in bringing us up here. It is an honor for us to come up here and share this information with you. It wasn't an idea that we actually had time for this year because our schedule is very crazy, going all over internationally and teaching and doing planetary good work. But a situation came up where one of the people who was teaching Kathara couldn't come here, and somebody had to come and bring the material to you because there were already people registered to come. So we were brought up here by Monica and the people who are working with her. And I would like to thank Monica and Cicely and Alexis and whoever else has helped to bring us here, because it is an honor. I've always wanted to come to Canada to bring the teachings, because since I was a child I visited once in the Ontario region, and I always liked it here. I just felt the energy. I resonated with it in a way I couldn't understand. So this was a place that I always wanted to be able to come to bring these teachings, and now we're here. So I'd just like to thank everybody, and I hope everybody can appreciate the effort of those people who organized this, because they did most of the work of putting it together, just like we've done most of the work of putting the program together. Now, the program that we're going to spend the next, this evening and 2 days exploring is called Kathara. Excuse me, the Kathara Biospiritual Healing System. Now, this is a healing program that is built on what is called divine blueprint science. This is an ancient science that is more advanced in its way than what is called science in our world today. Yet it is completely translatable into what we call science today. What is most important about the biospiritual healing system that's called Kathara is that it gives us an opportunity to begin to understand the reality of what we are made of. Most of us have some idea that we have a physical body, obviously. We have a mental body of some sort, a mind that is aware of having a physical body. And most of us hope, at least, that we have a spiritual body, whatever that might be, because that's our connection to something larger than here, bigger than here, that gives us purpose and reason. Some people call it God, some people call it spirit, some people don't call it anything, but they sense that living life force that they're a part of, whether or not they have a body. Now, not everybody realizes that the body is just a very tiny part of the anatomy of the human being. It's only a very tiny part of the anatomy of matter. We're in a system that we have our bodies here, but we're also in a world that appears to be three-dimensionally solid. It appears to be made of particles, and our scientists tell us about quarks and all sorts of little subatomic particles, protons, electrons, all those things. So there's obviously a thing called matter that's out here. But behind this thing called matter, both the matter that our bodies are made of and the matter that the planet is made of, there is much more of an anatomy of energy structure. There's a structure called the Kathara grid. There is a structure of many layers of the Kathara grid that bring us up to the point where what is not manifest becomes manifest as matter. The power of the human being, the power of the human being as a spiritual creation, exists in those realms of anatomy that are beyond what we see in the three-dimensional form. Those are the areas of our anatomy that literally direct what our physical bodies will do. They direct our birth process, our aging process, our growth process. They direct whether we will be healthy or sick. If we don't understand the anatomy that exists behind our matter, we are going to be at the mercy of that matter. If our body gets old, we're not going to know what to do to change that, to stop it, or to fix it. If our body gets sick, we're going to try to fix it from the outside in. But if there's something wrong in the templates beneath the matter, we're not going to be able to create a permanent fix or a permanent healing. Kathara healing takes us into the core template of matter. It takes us not only into the levels of healing or holistic healing that are identified in things like Chinese acupuncture, which deal with meridian lines in the body, with Reiki systems of healing, which deal with the subtle energy bodies and chakras and using symbol codes to work with them. Beneath all of those levels of your body anatomy, your subtle body anatomy, there is a core structure that governs what your chakras are going to do, what your meridian lines are going to do, and what your matter particles are going to do. What's fascinating about learning your anatomy, it's like we've been going through thousands of years thinking that we only had, let's say, one hand and one leg. And we've been trying to get along with that one hand and one leg, not realizing there was a whole other half of our body that if we learned how to use it, we would be able to walk and function much better. The other half of our body, their anatomy, that we have not been using in the last 25,000 years especially, has been the part called the Kathara grid. The subtle energy systems that get into the primal life force currents and how they come through the body template to manifest what we call our physical form. But they don't only manifest the physical form. And this is why we call Kathara a bio, referring to biology, spiritual healing system. Spirit, consciousness. The consciousness that makes you aware of who you are today, that helps you to remember who you were yesterday, who you were as a child, the part of you that allows you to visualize who you might like to become or where you might like to go in the future. This part of you that you call consciousness is your spirit. It's right here with you. It's not separate from you. The Kathara grid template that your body matter manifests on is also the template of energy that your consciousness manifests into dimensionality through. It's what gets you into your body. If there are template problems within the human body, which right now there are on a global scale, and there have been for 25,000 years, if there are problems in the template, there will not only be problems with the matter form, there will be problems with the consciousness as it tries to get into that matter form. Right now, the way things work in our system is when we are in spirit form, before we enter a process called fetal integration, where we as spirit, consciousness, come into a body vehicle to have an incarnation here, we have a problem with the body pattern here because of template distortions, which means as soon as the consciousness comes into the body and intertwines itself with the DNA template, with the gene code, the DNA template literally shuts off about 90% of the consciousness. The part that's left here grows. This is what becomes the person. You remember you as a baby being. It becomes the person that you grow to be here. But the rest of who you are, who you were when you came in, is who you still are, but you don't remember it because you can't bring the memory of yourself as a spirit directly in, because the body serves as a light switch. It's turning most of the current off, most of the current of your consciousness. Now, the current of your consciousness, if you had it fully embodied as a human being with a human template, you would have a minimum of 12 dimensions of consciousness, not just seeing a three-dimensional reality field, but you would be able to access and move your consciousness and your body through 12 dimensions of matter, which means different matter density levels. We were, once upon a time, a species that was immortal. Our bodies did not die. Death is not a natural condition for the human body form. However, we've been dying for a very long time on this planet. There's a reason why we've been dying on this planet, and that reason is a genetic mutation. It's a genetic mutation that has been rendered on the deepest core template level of the subtle bodies, the Kathara grid. And because of that, literally, the way our chromosome structures evolve, the way our gene code in chemical terms evolves, is not what it was intended to be. It is not functioning on its original divine blueprint. So we find ourselves trapped as consciousness in a mortal body form that has a very, very short lifespan that progressively deteriorates before our eyes. By the time we hit 35 years old, we start to feel it. We start to feel what's called the death hormone. It starts to kick in, and it starts to make you tired when 10 years ago the same thing didn't make you tired. The body literally starts to kill itself. It poisons itself with chemical toxins. Science here calls this normal. They call it the aging process. They tell us that we're supposed to accept the fact that birth, death, and paying taxes are about the only thing that's really certain in existence. Science here accepts death as what it's supposed to be like for a human form, because science here is based on a very small amount of partial knowledge, because the ancient knowledge was hidden from the races on this planet. It was hidden in order to make us easy to control, in order to keep us from remembering the rest of ourselves why we were here. Now, when we get into the Templar workshop, which will be next weekend, we'll get into the reasons, who did this, who done it, and why have we been, as a race, suffering for 25,000 years? Why, if we were immortal, why the heck have we been dying all these years? Why don't we remember who we are if we're somebody special? If we're something different than what we perceive as animals, and we actually have this huge amount of consciousness called spirit that has the answers to everything, is directly connected to God, why don't we know this? Why does it seem like something we wish for? Hope is there, but we have no evidence to really support. There are reasons why these things took place, and the reasons are huge. We're in the middle of a big, big drama right now on this planet. It's not a drama that started yesterday. It's a drama that started in a period of time that's known as the Atlantean period. Now, we hear legends of Atlantis coming up in our culture these days, and it's still a fictional place in terms of mainstream experts telling us what our past was. Mainstream experts base their interpretation of what they think our past was on records and bones that they found and guesses they've made as to what those might mean if you put them together in certain ways. Right now, our cultures are being fed through mainstream science. They're being fed partial facts and guesses as if they were absolute truth, as if they were proven, when in fact the assumptions that science frequently comes up with by looking at evidence but not having any idea of what to compare it to, we're being taught assumptions as core truth, and we're learning to accept that. We're learning to accept we came out of animals, probably apes, Darwinian theory, but now there's a little argument in the scientific community. No, maybe it wasn't out of apes, but rather something that swam in the waters once upon a time, and then we grew limbs and hands and things. Our flippers became limbs, and we walked up on land and became air breathers. And the real one, the Big Bang Theory, if you look at it, takes us right back to we started as pond scum. And somehow we managed to manifest ourselves in the water, then up on land, and here we are, the next generation of, must have been the progression through from pond scum to fish thing to ape thing into what we call human. If you look at the amount of stretch it takes in concepts to come up with that idea as your core truth, you can get some idea of what science is doing right now. There are reasons why science is doing what it's doing. Those reasons won't be identified in this particular course too much. It'll be in the next course, because that gets into something called Illuminati, which are a body of people on this planet that have been doing things with information for many thousands of years in order to control the large amounts of people in a negative way. We'll talk about Illuminati when we get into the Templar workshop, and we'll talk about a whole lot more. But in this workshop, we're going to talk about what's most important to you as a person first, before we deal with the big picture drama that we're all in the middle of right now. Because believe me, you'll want to know all this stuff before you find out what we're in the middle of right now, so it doesn't scare you to death. See, there's no reason to be afraid of the big picture drama if you already know the solutions. All right? So here, we're going to give you the solutions first. The solutions have to do with understanding what your body is, what your mind is, what your consciousness is, where your spirit's located, and how to get it the heck back into your body so you can start having a better life experience here. Kathara healing is the beginning process of learning how to do that, because we will learn literally the anatomy, the structure of our anatomy on 15 dimensions. Now, 15 dimensions. It's funny if you look at science again, they have all sorts of theories. There's a unified field theory. There's quantum theory. Theory implies guess, because we don't know. All right? Now, this information that is being presented here, you will be shown the structure of 15-dimensional physics. You will be shown the structures that exist within those structures that allow us to create what's called the hologram of matter. This is not a theory. Now, scientists would love to argue with me, I'm sure. Well, how do you know it's not a theory? Everything is a theory. No, it isn't. Fortunately, there are levels of reality. There are beings in levels of reality that have not been involved with the distortions of consciousness and biology that have taken place on this planet, who have held the records, who have held the original creation records that literally detail the spiritualized science by which creation itself is brought into manifestation by a common source intelligence that many people choose to call God. It's not a God that sits on a big throne and has a white beard and stuff. It's a consciousness. We were created in the image of God. That doesn't mean we're all men. That was a man twist. Humans created that one. We were created in the image of God as consciousness, as spirit, as awareized energy. Now, we're going to learn about the structure of how we as awareized energy got ourselves into this predicament of being stuck in a mortal body. We're going to learn 15-dimensional structure, and I will teach this to you as an absolute, not as a theory. Now, you have the absolute free will choice to take anything I say and consider it a theory, a guess, or a belief, as opposed to something that is known. But in my life and in my world, these things are known. So I teach with a lot of conviction, because I'm not teaching you guesses. I'm teaching you what I've known and found to be true. Part of the reason that, even though I was painfully shy all through my growing up stage, and I literally dropped out of college because I had a public speaking class as a requirement, and I got an A on my written speech, and it was my turn to go up and read it. And I couldn't deal with it because I was terrified of talking to people this way. I was used to telepathy, but not speaking. Now, what could possibly get somebody who's that painfully shy up doing what I'm doing, talking about absolutely radical theories of science and spirit in front of all sorts of audiences all over the world? You can't fake that one. It takes a lot of conviction. It takes a knowing and a desire to share a truth that has created a freedom in my life. A freedom that, because I know these things, because I've been taught these things, and I have used the technologies, I have found levels of my own consciousness, got them back into body. I have learned to do things with my consciousness, and we're beginning to learn how to do them with our bodies, that are science fiction compared to what science tells you is possible. I know that these are the freedom teachings, and if I can at least get some of that across to each one of you, and each one of you will get a little piece that's all your own. It'll mean something different to every one of you, because every one of you came here for a different reason. There's a need that brought every one of you here, a core need that you might not even know on a conscious level, but there was some piece of information that you were looking for that would be your next step to grab hold of, so you could start to make a difference and start to find your power again. Because what's happened on this planet to everybody is that we have lost our power. Right now, we walk around in a world that appears to inflict itself on us from the moment we take our first breath. We appear to be in a world that happens to us, not a world that we create. We appear to have all sorts of things coming at us constantly. That is a very real appearance when you're stuck here. But when we start to realize the framework of reality that is creating this, when we start to realize this is a hologram field. What's that? It's a thought form field. That means, theoretically, my thoughts should be able to influence it, right? Theoretically. Well, they do. If your DNA imprint was working the way it was designed to work by its divine blueprint, by the original blueprint that Source created humans to be, you would be able to literally manifest everything directly into matter with no problem at all. There are a lot of ascension teachings out there these days in the New Age movement. They will teach you it's all mind over matter. Just believe this or believe that, and poof, so it will be. Well, it's like there's a lot of poofs happening out there, but people are still sitting in their chairs. Nobody's demanifested yet. Nobody's been able to manifest a house like that right before them when they only have 2 pennies in their pocket. There's a lot of promises being made in the New Age movement with what we call partial and or false ascension teachings that are teaching you part of the mechanics of the way the mind is indeed supposed to be able to, as a spirit, create what it desires in matter. But what is not being taught is what is stopping that process from working functionally and effectively, where each one of us could not worry about life because we'd be able to manifest what we desire. We can use positive thinking. We can use affirmations. I am this now. I am whole now. I am demanifesting now. I'm still here. That is the beginning, learning to use the mental body more effectively. But if it were that simple, You would demanifest now once you gave the command. The reason the commands don't jump into immediate action in our 3D world is because there's a distortion taking place between our mind thought patterns and we as spirit desiring to do something, and the chemical realities in the body and the energy realities behind them. There are distortions taking place in the templates that are taking what our intention is and doing things to it, and it comes out to be something different in the hologram. Since 25,500 BC, there's been something wrong with the planetary grids in the way they're running frequency. There's been a problem in the electromagnetic fields on the planet, and that has created severe mutation in the DNA of all life forms on the planet. There was a time when life on Earth had what was called a variable base genetic code. That means the genetic alphabet, which are the chemical components of the DNA chains, were made out of a different amount of chemicals. A frog would have one amount of chemical combinations, a human would have another amount, a tree would have another amount. Right now, science was amazed to find, when they started to get into DNA, that everything appears to have what's called a base 4 genetic alphabet. That literally 4 chemicals that combined into different combinations are what make up the gene code of all things. So they assume that that's the way it is. They assume that's normal. That is not normal. This whole planet right now is under a base 4 genetic mutation called the checkerboard DNA mutation that is being caused because of a distortion in the electromagnetic fields on the planet. Now, when we get into Cathara in the next 2 days, we're going to learn how an electromagnetic field distortion on the planet could actually affect the DNA of life forms, how that could actually happen. Because we're going to learn about something called the Planetary Biofeed Interface System, which is the system by which primal life force currents come through from source through the universal matrix into the galactic matrix, into the planetary matrix, and into the bodies of everything on the planet. This is how we have our consciousness connection to primal energy, which is the primal consciousness and intelligence of source. These energies are supposed to flow in a very specific way. We get energy fed to us from the planet. This is how our spirit downloads into our body. It goes through the planetary grids and back into our fields. Because the planetary grids have been damaged, our Mother Earth Terra Gaia here, our planet, is ill. It has been ill since 25,500 BC, actually before that, but the real illness set in then. There has been this mutation that has existed in the gene code that has blocked out most of the DNA. It's done that by blocking out most of the DNA template. So we're going to learn about what a DNA template is as opposed to the chemical DNA. We're going to learn about the body systems, the interwoven subtle energy systems, like chakras and meridians and axiotonal lines and things called Huva bodies and Cathara grids and crystal seals that are all part of the regulatory system of the DNA template, all of which work together to create what manifests as the chemical DNA chains. The reason we are stuck here is because most of our DNA has been turned off. What science looks at now and calls junk DNA, which are sequences of DNA that appear to not produce proteins. They appear to be dormant and don't do anything. They just sit there in the DNA chains. They didn't always sit there. Once upon a time, they were filled with things that created chemicals, created proteins, created building blocks for life. As we work with Cathara, we will be able to trace where the distortions are, and we don't need a laboratory to begin the process of reverse mutation. Reverse mutation of the genome, the human genome, which means bringing it back to its original base 12 potential. Base 12 means there were 12 chemical components that made up the DNA chains on a physical level. It meant there were 12 strand templates on the subtle body levels that when it works right, they come into manifestation, manifest the chemicals, and with those chemicals we are able to hold 12 dimensions of consciousness, which is the consciousness of what is known as an avatar. We were all born to be avatars. We were born to be, some of us, ascended masters. We'll talk a little bit in this course about indigo children. That's a buzzword in the New Age movement now. Indigo children, they're special, they're something. What are they? You know? We'll talk a little bit about that because they're a human form, but they have a DNA template that goes beyond 12 strands. They have from 24 to 48 strand potential because they came here as part of a rescue mission. They're a species, a Lyran-Sirian species of human consciousness that came to help reset the templates of the DNA here on this planet. Most people that are drawn to this work are indigo children, but they don't know it. Indigos don't know they're indigos till they wake up. Humans don't know they're supposed to be angelic until they wake up. So we're all stuck down here wondering, what do I do with myself next? If you look at life in the three-dimensional term, and you look at the options our societies give us, it can be really, really depressing. Because you get to the point where, okay, you work all this time, you work really, really, really hard, so you can make what? Money. So why? So you can have a roof over your head and maybe a nice life. And by the time you make enough money to get that roof over your head and have a nice life, most of the time you've run so much energy through your body and exhausted yourself so much that your body falls apart. So you get to sit in a nice house and call the doctor. And then what you want more than anything, and you're even willing to give up your nice house to have it, is your health back. It's almost like if God made it this way on purpose, he had a very strange sense of humor. Slightly masochistic, slightly sadistic. God is not a sadist. What we are living here was not the intended divine blueprint of this planetary system. What is happening here has hung us up in an evolutionary time warp where we're actually de-evolving instead of moving forward in our evolution back into the full avatar expression that we were created to be. It's not just us that's being affected, not just humans are being affected by this particular genetic mutation. Every life form on this planet, because every life form is connected to the planetary grids, is suffering right now. Animals are trapped in a very unnatural relationship where they have to energy vampire off each other, which means they have to kill each other in order to simply sustain. That's where you get your food chain. That's not natural either. It is natural on planets that are not able to run the higher frequency currents or the primal life force currents. If this planet were running the full spectrum of 15-dimensional currents, and particularly the first 12 of those 15, it would be very different here. Lions and lambs would lay down with each other. Humans would not kill each other. It would be the type of reality that our holy books have promised us exists, a reality that is very heavenly indeed. The beginning of returning the potentials of having a heaven on earth starts with each person, because human beings were created as an angelic species that was appointed as the guardians of this planet. We were supposed to help the other life forms on this planet to evolve into their full expression of their divine blueprints. We were supposed to be loving keepers of the planetary Templar complex, which is something we'll talk about next weekend that has to do with stargates. Somewhere along the line, we got in trouble. And right now, we are functioning with the animals, with the plants, in a way that's completely not organic for our consciousness. There is a pain that every one of us carries. It is a soul pain, a very deep soul pain, that knows something vital has been robbed from us. Some of us turn that pain into anger. Some people are born angry. They carry that feeling, that knowing, that they have been somehow victimized. Now, there is a victimization taking place here, but there is a point of consciousness that happens to exist in the higher dimensional fields where you start to understand the victim-victimizer game and you don't get trapped in it anymore. But when you have your consciousness shut off at D3 and somebody tells you, well, victim-victimizer is just a game, you don't have to play it, it doesn't seem quite real. Nice concept, but it doesn't change the fact that I feel awful, you know? And great, okay, the New Age movement, you're manifesting this. Okay, I take responsibility, I'm manifesting this. How do I stop manifesting this? How do I get control over my life so I can live in a way that is peaceful and loving and joyful? So I feel that I am at one with Source. So I have a loving relationship with God and with other things. How do I bring that potential back? The beginning of that is bringing back the consciousness, the part of your consciousness that right now holds that knowledge in a higher dimensional field. The way you can bring that consciousness back in is to open up the conduits in the subtle body that will open up the chemicals in the DNA body that will allow those frequencies of consciousness to come in to your mind and your body here, so you can have access to your higher consciousness. This is why Kathara is not only a system that will begin the process of healing the physical body, it is a spiritual healing system in the greatest sense of the word. It is a healing system that will begin the process of bringing you as an avatar consciousness literally back into focus here, where you don't have to feel trapped anymore. You don't have to feel like you have to resign yourself to the fact that death and illness and taxes are the only thing that life is about down here. One of the things that when you begin to realize what you really are, before you realize who you are, you need to realize what you are. You're in a human form. What is that? What does it mean? Once you know that, you start to realize something. There's a big lie that's been told here for a long time. Be afraid of death. We're taught to be scared of dying, as if we, who we are, our identity, stops when the physical body stops. Science especially will tell you that consciousness is a byproduct of electrical things happening in the brain, and just so happens to be there. And when the brain is no longer there, consciousness therefore is no longer there either. Yet in the same mouthful, they'll tell you energy can't be created or destroyed, it just changes form. Make up your mind. Which one is it going to be, guys? What you're going to find is we do simply change form as consciousness. And once you fully really know what this means, you'll begin to realize that you don't die when you die, even if your body does die, which isn't the ideal way to get out of here, but that seems to be the easiest way to get out these days. But even if your body dies, your consciousness, you still wake up on the other side. This is not a theory. I had a near-death experience when I was 18 years old, and one of the things that depressed me most was when my body died, I realized it. It was way down below me, and I knew it was dead. And I was still thinking. I didn't want to be here anymore because I was very sad to begin with, and I was still sad when I got over the other side. I said, wait a minute, I just want to go to sleep. I'm supposed to be dead. Can I be dead? And I heard a voice. It was like my own higher self saying, you can play dead if you want to. It's like, all right, something's wrong with this picture. They tell you when you die you're going to be dead. And, well, I know it's dead down there, and I could feel this cord of energy disconnecting from the body. And this awareness started to come to me. My higher self, my own higher identity, was communicating with me and saying, you have a choice now. You got out this far to where you can start to understand what your life's about and who you were and all that things. Do you want to go back? You could go back and you could teach this stuff. And I said, well, I didn't like it back there. I really like it here. I can think clear. There was a clearness, a clarity that came to me. And the first urge was, leave it dead. Thank you, I'll go on. What's next? But then there was a sense of responsibility and a realization of something profound that came to me. God, so many people down there are scared to death of dying. They think it's a horrible bad thing and they'll do anything to stop it from happening. Why? It's nice over here. It's nicer on the other side. At least if I could go back and share that much. Well, I ended up sharing a lot more than that, but that was the beginning of understanding through personal experience that there is life beyond the body here. One of the first things I learned was once you have a near-death experience, it opens up your 5th DNA strand template and a bit of your 4th, which means the consciousness from D5, which is part of your soul, and D4, your astral consciousness, make a link and they come back into body with you. So you still have an open conduit. This was one of the reasons on the higher levels my own identity had allowed a near-death experience to take place, so I could get more of myself into my body faster, so I could wake up here more quickly, so I could do the job that I had commissioned to do before I even came, that I didn't remember because my DNA had shut down. Every one of you have a part of yourself that knows exactly why you came here, exactly what your history is, where you were before, what you were part of, what you were doing. You don't have to have a near-death experience to begin to bring that part of your awareness back into body. And believe me, once you start to realize why you're here, it changes everything. First of all, you start to realize there's no such thing as an unimportant person. There is no such thing as somebody who is worthless. There is no such thing as somebody who doesn't fit or doesn't belong. And there is no such thing as a sinner. All right. Now this is a big one, the sinner concept. There's a book that used to be a nice book once upon a time, before the Council of Nicaea got a hold of it in 325 AD on behalf of the Roman Empire, and changed some books around. Once upon a time, the book that we call the Bible now was about 20 times bigger than it is, and the word sinner wasn't used once. We were not ever looked on by God as lowly, pathetic, bad creatures that could be manipulated by guilt to hopefully get back into God's favor. Why? So we wouldn't have to feel so miserable all the time down here. So maybe we could have what we needed. So maybe we didn't have to be afraid of death. There are teachings, the teachings that we're beginning to bring back here. The Kathara teachings were part of biblical texts. See, the Bible, what became the Bible, was part of a much larger series of books called the Mahabharata books. They are the teachings of the inner Christ. They are the teachings that Jesus taught. They were the teachings that John the Baptist and Miriam taught, that the Essenes taught 2,000 years ago. They were the teachings that, after that, the Cathari of southern France taught and were killed for it in 1244 AD when they were exterminated by, again, the Church of Rome, I believe, the Roman Catholic Church. There have been pieces of these books and the information contained within them preserved mostly in verbal tradition since they were last given in physical text, which was in the time of Jeshua, or Jesus, 2,000 years ago. Actually, 10 AD is when they were translated into writing. Jeshua was born in 12 BC, and by 10 AD, he and the people around him began the translations on the Mahabharata texts. The Mahabharata texts are part of a larger, huge body of information called the Emerald Covenant CDD plates, Cloister Doratura plates. They're ancient holographic discs that were given to this race in 246,000 BC, I believe. Yes, our race is that old and older. They were the original founders' race records of who we were, why we were put here, what our commission was, how science worked, how spirit works, how stargates work, how ascension works, and how to have a good time while you're in 3D. Because God wanted us to have a good time, because God's a loving God, not a wrathful God. The Mahabharata teachings, which were the teachings that pertain specifically to the inner Christ, which is the inner Templar, the energy systems and consciousness and spirit systems that run the body hologram, they also had teachings of the Templar, what we're beginning the teachings of next weekend, where you're dealing with the body's the body of the Earth's anatomy. The systems we'll learn about this weekend, about our subtle body anatomy, also pertain exactly and directly to the planet, to a galaxy, and to universes. It is the core template structure that the universe was built on, and every microcosmic aspect of the universe follows that same template pattern. It is the pattern by which energy from source circulates through the 15-dimensional system and individuates itself into all sorts of manifestations. These teachings, the teachings of the Mahabharata, the inner Christos, the inner Templar, were the teachings of the Law of One. The Law of One refers to a body of teachings that told us about our relationship to Source, where Source is a collective, intelligent consciousness, eternal, limitless, boundless, that chose, in order to understand itself better, to create a framework of reality where a hologram of three-dimensional manifestation could take place. So Source first turned itself into the hologram, the structures, dimensions, and time matrices, and energy body structures, and then Source continued to individuate itself, and it created suns and planets, stars, galaxies, and it continued to individuate itself, and it created life forms to live on those planets and stars and galaxies. The Law of One teaches us that each and every one of us are a manifestation, a direct face and manifestation of the consciousness of God. Where is God? There comes a time when you really understand the breadth of the Mahabharata teachings, where you don't have a weird reaction to the statement of someone saying, I am God. It doesn't mean, I'm God and I'm your boss. I get to boss over you because I'm God and you're not. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean, I'm the creator of the universe and therefore I know everything and I can be arrogant about it and obnoxious. That's showing how much you don't think you're God, because ego doesn't fit into that consciousness. When you can say, I am God, you are acknowledging the fact that a piece of Source individualized itself as you. And you'll also recognize at the same time that every other being is also a piece of Source, individualized. Source is learning to know itself progressively, eternally, through manifesting itself in a multitude of forms. These are the teachings that Jesus taught. These are the teachings that the Essenes traveled from place to place to teach and got hunted by all sorts of people because of it. We have been taught in our cultures a gross twist and distortion of our relationship to God. We've been taught God is way out there someplace and we're way down here someplace, and there's this big space in between the two. We have been taught that, not because they were the original teachings from Source, not because they were even the original teachings from Jesus. We were taught that because certain people, let's refer to them right now as the Illuminati Collective, who are in places of power since the Atlantean period, which technically ended in 9558 BC, they decided they'd like to run the world. They decided they would like to take over this planet and its stargates. And they decided the way to do that was to hijack the consciousness of the other life forms that lived here. And they knew Templar mechanics, so they knew how to do it. Templar mechanics, the inner Christos teachings, they were used and twisted in a way that created an ability by certain Illuminati forces. They call themselves Illuminati because they were illuminated, and it was a very arrogant way of looking at it. They had the technical teachings left, but what they lost contact with was the law of one. What they lost contact with was the feeling of Source within them, to where they could never hurt another life form because they knew it was only the self, because there was only one self. That was the God self, and that is all. The Illuminati races had the first distortions in genetic code on this planet. Their distortion in genetic code created within their consciousness a reciprocal distortion, where they began to make a division in their own understanding between God, themselves, and other people, to the point where they could inflict harm on other people and justify it by scientific teachings without having any conscience as to, or recognition that the people they were harming were another face, another aspect of themselves, because all were God. These teachings that once upon a time gave us freedom and the absolute free will joy to create, co-create with Source, the collective of what Source is. We were given those teachings for a joyful creation here. But they were taken and they were twisted into a control dogma. That control dogma took numerous types of forms. The first forms after Atlantis that came up through Sumerian culture, where we got stories of things like the god Marduk and these kind of things. We got creator god stories, God's Jehovah, God's Marduk, all sorts of gods. We had gods running around all over the place in the old Sumerian days. And then we had the Egyptian period, where even more gods came into the scene, and all of a sudden, gods weren't the living presence of spirit within you. Gods became things out there and beings who said, I'm your God. In other words, I'm your bully. We lost touch with the teachings that allowed the force and consciousness and cognition of being God to move through us. The teachings took us from saying, no, that's not right. This is God. You have to worship this out here, outside of yourself. Now, that couldn't have been done to us if the planetary grid distortions hadn't taken place. If that hadn't happened, if the things to the planetary grids hadn't happened and our DNA was functioning the way it was designed to function, nobody could have done that to us. Nobody could have told us a lie about the relationship to God, because we were a living embodiment of that knowing. But when our DNA became distorted, when our DNA templates became distorted, because the planetary grids became distorted, we lost the conscious awareness while we were in our 3D bodies of what our relationship to Source was. And it was very frightening, because we were an avatar race that was used to knowing that God was always with us and a part of us, and we were a part of God. We had our memory banks wiped. And there were several instances, I won't get into it in this workshop, but in the Templar workshop, we'll touch on a few moments in history that actually survived in the records in the Bible, like the Tower of Babel. We call that the Babylon Massacre, because we've been babbling ever since. Because what happened in the Babylon Massacre, and I believe that was 3470 BC, that's when a major acceleration in the grid damage was done to the planet, and it totally knocked our memory banks, our race memory banks, out of whack, and it totally messed up our DNA, creating that base 4 distortion in the chemical DNA that I told you about. We'll talk a little bit at the end of this workshop with some of the new material that's just being added to Cathara right now about the translation between DNA template and chemical DNA. And we'll begin to understand that when I'm talking about DNA and DNA templates and subtle bodies, this goes right down into how many chromosomes you have in your body and what's in each of those chromosomes. It goes right down into what science identifies as the sequence of chemicals that make up one gene, and then how many genes go together to make up the gene code. All of these things have been directly affected and mutated, deviated from the original pattern because of a series of events that took place that progressively amplified the distortions in the planetary grids. So it's interesting. I like to start the teachings of the Maharata teachings, because the Maharata teachings are about the inner Christos. And the most important part that's going to be for you at first is, what does that mean to me personally? Okay? How do I get that waking up in my body? How do I get my consciousness here? How do I learn more and grow to become what I am? And how do I remember what I am? Because I don't even remember here. If I remembered what I am, I might understand why I came here. You know? After we get to that point where we start to work with technologies, because these are technologies, they're technologies of directing energy through your mental body directly into very specific systems in your body that if you don't know what the systems are, you're not going to know how to direct them. But you're going to take these technologies, use them to begin the process of waking yourself up. And then, as you wake up, if you want to, and you can grow at your own rate, but those of you who are ready to take the Templar course next weekend, we will get into what's called the forbidden history. The history books of this planet were not destroyed. They were just hidden. They have been hidden since 9558 BC especially, which was a period of time that in the Bible became the Great Flood. It was a flood that was done on purpose, and it wasn't planetary, but it was a great house cleaning of all the historical records, including many, many of the archaeological finds that would have otherwise already been discovered. There was a house cleaning done on this planet, and records were hidden. They were hidden, and some of them were taken off planet. We'll find out what our drama is today, what we're seeing. When we watch TV right now, it's getting really interesting out there in the drama. We just had the trade centers blow up in America at the hands of a terrorist. What does that have to do with subtle body anatomy? Everything. Our political dramas that we're moving into in the world. Political dramas that are going to affect each one of us, whether you live in the States or Canada or Afghanistan. All of these political dramas and the surface propaganda that we're being given have to do with some very real events that are taking place behind the scenes, that have to do with the planetary Templar complex, that have to do with the fact that for the first time since the Atlantean period, and the first time fully in over 200,000 years, the stargates are opening, and it has been known for thousands and thousands of years by the groups called the Illuminati that this would happen in this period of time, because stargates open on cycles. They open for a while, and sometimes you can keep them open if your planetary Templar is working right, but other times you can't sustain them open all the time, and they close again. But then they're due to open at another point in a fixed cycle. So literally, the ancient races here knew that in this time period, between the year 2000 and 2012, stargates were going to open. Now we're at a point of mass disillusionment on this planet, to the point where we don't even remember stargates existed. We were supposed to be the guardians of those stargates, the ones that protected them from other races of beings who had genetic problems and consciousness problems, who would try to get control of them and cause harm here. Right now, the dramas we are watching unfold, and they're not going to go away, they're going to escalate between now and 2008 in the political arena. These dramas have to do with Stargate Quest. And that's not something you're going to hear on the news, not for a long time anyway. We're in the middle of a massive drama that goes back into the Atlantean period that we'll talk about in the Templar course. But before we worry about the mass drama, we need to understand the solutions that have to do with our personal dramas as we sit in our own little lives and try to figure out, what do I do with myself? I have feelings and things I might like to do or experience, but most of us don't even know what it means to be here, or why we're here. We just kind of like amuse ourselves with trying to follow things that feel good. We go on the pleasure-pain principle. We move away from things that don't feel good and we move toward things that do feel good. And if we do that for most of our life, we get to the point where we're 80 or 90 years old and we don't move much because our bodies are falling apart. And we sit there and remember all of the good things as much as possible. Or we go into the negative and remember all the bad things. And then we sit there in our bodies that don't move very well anymore, and this big ominous fear sits with us. My body's dying. Oh my God. What does that mean? That's when people like really get out the Bible and say, is your name Jehovah? Whatever your name is, please. Hi, I'm here. Sorry I didn't talk to you all my life, but I'm really ready now. I'm really, really sorry if I was bad, That's where we start to say, okay, maybe I was a sinner. Well, how do you get over that? Okay, that's atonement, right? Okay, what page did you look that up on? Okay, atonement. Hello. Because we're terrified of, oh my God, what if we die and there is a God? And if there is a God, and we didn't do what was said in the Bible or whatever holy book we're following, does that mean God's going to be really mad and do something awful to us? Or if I'm afraid of that so much that I'm going to just go the science way, I'm going to accept the fact that my consciousness is going to be annihilated when my body dies. So you sit there and wait to be annihilated. Real fun. I have children in this world, and so does Az. And think of the things that if we were raising them in the regular belief systems that are here, how depressing it is to tell your kids, oh, hey mom, what's life about? What does it mean when you're 20? And what does it mean when you're 30? Well, when you're 20, you still feel like it's worth it. When you're 30, you still hope it is, but you didn't get half as far as you wanted to. By the time you're 35, you start to feel the tug of the gene code where you get really tired. And it's all a lot harder to do what you were doing at 20, and it was easy, but you still have hope. By the time you're 40, you're in rebellion, and you want to go through a second childhood or adolescence because the whole thing that you tried to do didn't work out very well. So you go into wish fulfillment. Then by the time you're 50, you got too tired from your second childhood and decide that you better make peace with yourself, so it's a good time to get spiritual. So there's this whole process of things that we can mark our lives with in 10-year increments that have to do with dealing with the fact that we don't know what we're here for, we don't know what to do with ourselves while we're here, and we're terrified of what it means to be anyplace else because we might not be at all. When you have to look at your kids and realize this is what you need to tell them if you're going to do the mainstream thing, it's worth finding a better option, even if it makes you sound weird compared to the neighbors. Yeah. My daughter is really funny. She's 9 years old, and she talks to me about things. She'll come in and say, Mom, I can't sleep. My DNA is activating again. And I look at her and I just smile, because once upon a time in the ancient of days, all kids spoke like that. They knew. They knew when things were happening in their bodies and their DNA. They knew. They were taught since the time they were very small about where their chakras were located and about what this type of sensation meant, what that meant. They knew who they were. They knew why they were here, and they knew what to watch for and what to do with their energy system. So I'm watching my daughter, who sounds like an absolute nut compared to the other kids in the neighborhood, right? Only to their parents. She makes perfect sense in our house. But I watch her and I look at the hope that's being brought back here. A new generation of children now are going to be raised with the knowledge of what it means to have chakras and what it means to have subtle bodies and what it means to be a spirit using the vehicle of flesh to express yourself. It's also going to raise a generation of rebels who are going to look at the old system, say, excuse me, I don't think so. I come from a very big love space and I don't have to fight with you, but I don't have to buy your nonsense either. And they're going to find a way. Because we're beginning to have the teachings brought back to us, where we can all find a way of reharnessing the power that was our birthright from the beginning, which is the power of manifestation. Before we can reclaim our power of manifestation, we need to reclaim the vessel through which manifestation takes place. And that means we need to heal our bodies, our DNA templates. Because through that healing, we will get the rest of ourselves back in and remember all the wonderful knowledge we forgot. Once you start remembering, you won't need a speaker to tell you stuff. You'll realize you can access it directly through your own consciousness. Michael and I are speakers. Azertania and I call them. I oscillate between the two, Michael and Azertania. They're both his name. We're speakers, which means we have a job that we commissioned to do. We came in here as souls, as part of a team, part of the Indigo team, Team Indigo. We came in to help bring back the ancient teachings. But the teachings don't belong to us. They belong to all of you. They belong to everybody in this universe. We simply trained in a way that we could, on a planet with as much distortion in the grids as this one has. There were certain specialties of training that we needed to go through in order to understand how to get ourselves in a body, clear enough of the mess out of the gene code so we could then bring in the information and translate it in verbal form. But the information exists, and now the frequencies are becoming available on the planet. So even if there weren't speakers putting it in books for you to learn, if you knew just a little bit, if you knew that you have an avatar consciousness that lives right with you, and that there are things you can do to begin opening that knowledge, you would be able to begin accessing this data on your own. Now, the service that we do for people right now is to help them remember that. Because right now, if we didn't tell people this, people would still be having little choice other than believing what we've been told for thousands of years, which is we're pathetic, we're sinners, we die when our body dies, all this stuff, all this nonsense. If you don't know you have an avatar consciousness level, you're not going to be interested in looking for it, because you're not going to know it's there. Tonight we're going to go through, I'm hoping to get through chapter 1 tonight, all right, which is going to take us into something called context. Before it's going to matter much to learn how to identify your body parts, your subtle body parts, and identify currents that you're running through your body for healing, it will help a lot if you know the structure or the context within which your body exists. Where do these currents come from? What is the structure of multidimensional reality? This isn't a theory, there is a structure. There is a primal order to the way the universe was created. Our universe is created in a way that allows systems of three-dimensional holograms to be perceptually experienced by consciousness that focuses itself within those systems. Even our body is part of the hologram. So we're going to learn first the context of healing, which is the system of multidimensional reality, primal order, what it's made out of. We're going to learn a bit about what a dimension is. Like, what is a dimension? Science has one definition. We consider, I think science now kind of uses the word dimension as a characteristic of, like an adjective of something. When we use the word dimension, we're using it as a noun, person, place, or thing. It is a thing. It is not a characteristic of a something else. It is a thing unto itself. So tonight, before we leave, I'm going to try to get you through at least halfway through chapter 1, if not all the way through. I'm not ready for that yet. Thank you. Okay. The fun part, this is like the work part, right? The fun part of learning these things is not learning about dimensions and primal structure, all right? This is the hard work part. What was a dimension? What's a Partakai unit? What is a flash line sequence? Oh Lord, new words, right? Lots of them. This is the part that is one of the most difficult parts to learn in the whole book. But in the book, in the Kathara Manual, you have intricate explanations of what we're talking about. What I'm talking about here, that if I were to try to take this book, this manual, one page at a time, we'd have to just schedule like a year-long retreat and take, like 1 page a day to go over everything it means. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a shorthand version and try to bring into focus what the words in the texts are referring to. But things that you might move too fast, and we talked about it but you don't remember what it was, the stuff is going to be in the writing so you can look for it. But we're going to learn some new words. We're going to learn a new interpretation of the word dimension. We're going to learn some words called Partakai, and Partakam, which are units of consciousness, the basic building blocks of all matter and manifestation. We're going to learn how they form together to create something called Partakai grids, and Partakai grids build up to form what becomes Kathara grids, what becomes primal order blueprints and templates. And on those templates are what all structure manifests upon. So once we learn some of the basic harder stuff, just getting oriented to the context, it's the context of living, which is also the context of healing. If you're going to heal, you need to know what part needs healing. And to understand what parts need healing in the human race and in your own personal body, you need to understand those subtle parts that go right into context. If you don't understand dimensional structure, you're not going to be very good at deciding which primal life force currents you're going to pull if you want to do hands-on healing. I kind of look at some of these other healing systems that are out there, and a part of me chuckles because they take themselves very seriously, some of them. Some of them charge $10,000 for a master's level certification. I won't mention any names. But interestingly, they don't know yet 15-dimensional structure. So they couldn't tell you a triadic phase current from a D3 current. They don't have the context. They will give you processes you can use to play with energy, but they don't yet understand because their teachers didn't understand what the context of this healing. They didn't have primal order structure. The reason they didn't have it was because these records were not released on the planet until February of 2000 was when there was a certain security release of data from what I talked about before, the Emerald Covenant Cloister Doratura plates, the ancient records that are held in holographic form. There's actually discs that hold these records. Translation was allowed for the first time since the Atlantean period on this information, on primal order structure, on primal substance, which are Partakai units. This information is being brought back now. So all of those other healing systems that people have been using, holistic healing systems, you don't throw them out. You simply show the context they fit in, because if they would combine what they're doing with Kathara healing, they would be able to increase hugely the positive effects of healing that can be gained through those systems. So what's nice about the Kathara system, it doesn't mean if you took this one or that one or Reiki or something like that, you throw out your books and just say it was no good. No, you learn to take the best from what you were taught before. You also become familiar with the context of healing and the context of reality enough to where you can start to say what's the good stuff and what stuff's nonsense, so you can throw the nonsense out, but you keep the good stuff and you use it and integrate it into the Kathara program. Now you can do healing without Kathara, but good luck to you, because you're using lower dimensional currents unless you know your Kathara grid, unless you know how to open D12 current. This is what Kathara Level 1 is built on, learning to run what's called the Maharata ray. That is the D12 hydroplasmic liquid light ray of the 12th dimensional frequency bands. It's also called the Christos frequency, because it begins the relationship to the unified field of liquid light. It is the stage called pre-matter. Before things come into manifest dense form, they go from being no form whatsoever into antimatter, which is like a gaseous light form. Then they solidify into liquid light form. The liquid light form of D12 is the pre-matter template. That is the divine blueprint template, because from there, from that universal field of liquid light, form differentiation begins to happen. That's where consciousness takes the form of a star, a planet, a galaxy, or a person, or an ant, or a tree. That's where your original mathematical program that holds the imprint for your body and for your consciousness coming into density is located. So what we're going to do in Kathara 1 is learn how to open up D12 current, the liquid light pre-matter current, which is the Christos ray. Some people call it the platinum ray because it's pale silver white when you see it with the etheric vision. This is the beginning of resetting the mathematical program of your divine blueprint back into your Kathara system, your template, to wake up your divine blueprint again. This is the only way a being can generate enough frequency to override the genetic distortion that's been keeping us imprisoned in mortal bodies for so long. Without the D12 frequency, which has the ability to pull together all of the other frequencies below it, dimensions 1 through 11, it can pull those frequencies together and reset them to their original natural dimensional pattern, their mathematical coding. So if there's any distortions in the lower dimensional fields, the D12 frequency has the power to override it and set it back to its original imprint. The original imprint is what Source had decided was going to be the manifestation, and then it projected its energy into the creation framework, which is called the time matrix, which we'll learn about in context. From Source projecting its intention, what you were supposed to be, what you, when you were still a part of Source, wanted to be, why you came here. It set that impression, that original intention, in the D12 fields, It's located in liquid light. It's still an imprint. Now, because we've had distortions in the lower dimensional fields, we have not been able to express through the divine blueprint. That wouldn't happen on a planet that had the ability to naturally run D12 frequency. All planets start out with that ability. But there was grid damage done to this planet in 208,216 BC, long time ago. Those grid distortions made it so the planetary energy systems, which are called axiotonal lines, the Cathara grid of the planet, could only anchor 10 dimensions of frequency. It blocked out dimensions 11 and 12 frequency from the planetary grids, which meant anything on this planet could no longer run D12 frequency, so it could not fully access the original divine blueprint pattern. And once that direct connection in energy to the divine blueprint, between the manifestation and the divine blueprint, once that connection was severed, deterioration started to happen. The divine blueprint began to deviate in the lower dimensional fields, and you couldn't bring that frequency back in to reset it. What's happened here, and the reason why these teachings are being brought back now and they weren't brought back 100 years ago, is because what I said before about stargates beginning to open. There are things happening on this planet that haven't happened in thousands and thousands of years. And one of the biggest things is there has been work done here to repair the damage that was done 200,000 years ago. For the first time in over 200,000 years, D12 frequency started running through the planetary grids on January 1st of 2000 because of all sorts of reparative work. It's called the Christos Realignment Mission on a planetary level that has been being done here. We have available now the D12 hydroplasmic frequency, which means we have access to the full mathematical coding. Our own pillar of light can send it down. We can get back into our bodies and into our DNA template and into the planet, the original divine blueprint. So when we're working with Cathara healing, we're going to learn the context so you understand dimensional structure, because that will help you to understand where you're pulling what from. You're going to understand matter density levels, first of all. What it means to be physical, what it means to be physical in the next density up, which is still physical, but it's ghost-like compared to here. There are matter density levels. If you don't understand primal substance, you're not going to understand how matter density levels happen. So this is the part. Tonight we're going to do the part where you understand the basic framework. So you understand that it's a very easy, actually, framework. It's quite simple. There's millions of complexities as far as how energy works within the structure, but the structure itself is very, very simple. You don't need to have a master's degree in physics in order to understand primal units. You don't need to have a master's degree in anything to understand there are 15 dimensions. They relate to each other in a specific way. You're here, this is here, this is here, this is here, and this is how you make your relationship to the higher energy systems. This is what we're going to learn. So we'll go through that tonight. When we come in tomorrow, that's when the fun starts. The part that I love teaching most, and I guess it's probably because of the part that I enjoy most myself, is once you learn context, okay, that's what the universe is about and I'm floating around in it. The fun part is learning where your body parts directly connect to the primal structure of the universe, where your 15-dimensional anatomy is located. It's like finding a treasure chest. Wow, I have that? I have 15 chakras, primary chakras. Yes, I do. I have a Cathara grid. Do you know where yours is? Once this information was given back and I could play with it on a conscious level, I remember thinking, I wish I could retire right now, because I'd like to spend the next maybe 20 years just locked up in a nice little comfortable room someplace investigating. Okay, where's chakra 1? What if I take a tour with my consciousness through chakra 1? You will find, when you know these energy body systems, you will realize something. You have the ability to access amazing amounts of information. It's like having a new forest to explore. You've got you and your consciousness, and now you know at least a roadmap of where you can begin taking yourself. If you want to look at D1, the first dimensional frequencies, and see what's going on there, you'd use chakra 1. If you want to explore D5, which is out of the three-dimensional system, you would use chakra 5. You start to realize You don't need to entertain yourself with outside stuff. Once you start to open your mind inside and realize what you are and what you're a part of, you can entertain yourself from now until eternity. Teach yourself all sorts of things. It's like the best cable network you've ever seen. The internet, instead of the inner. So we all do have this inner net, the inner Templar, and once you start to play with it, and you can't really play with it until you realize where parts are. Once you know where your parts are, you can have some idea of what to do with your consciousness, where you can put your focus of attention to make it do certain things. So the fun part for me in teaching Kathara is teaching people about the body parts that you forgot you had. Because they're the body parts that also hold the stations of consciousness, that hold your soul identity, your oversoul identity, your avatar identity. These are the parts of yourself that hold huge amounts of knowledge, more knowledge than you could hold in a body here on the planet right now. This is why, when you begin to learn these things, if you really understand that these are the structures that Source created, this is not a theory that science came up with by trying to assume certain things by looking at fossils. This is a structure that has been here for over 500 million years on this planet. These records are that old. There was another copy of them given in 246,000 BC. That was not the first copy. These are the ancient original founders' teachings. Once you realize that you have access to this huge living matrix of knowledge, you'll also realize that there's not another person or thing on this planet that you have a right to pass hateful judgment against, no matter how bad they might act. It just shows you how far they have forgotten what they're a part of. You will learn that all the nonsense you might have been taught when you were young, you're worthless, you're not good enough, you'll never be good enough, all this stuff that so many of us have heard because our parents heard it from their parents, they passed it down. First of all, that stuff begins to heal. You start to realize there's no such thing as being a worthless person. There's no such thing as being not good enough. And when you start to realize that healing in yourself, you begin to change the way you look at other people automatically. You find compassion. You start to see behind what's causing them to be as they are, even if being as they are is not particularly nice at the moment. You begin to find what's called Christ consciousness. There's a lot of lip service to Christ consciousness happening in the New Age movement right now. I've met some amazing people who will arrogantly, clue number one that they're not here, arrogantly say, my 12 strands are activated. My 12-strand DNA is activated. I'm an avatar now. And it's like, yeah? Oh, good. Can you give me like a lesson in levitation? And they look at you and blink. Well, what does that mean? What do you mean, what does it mean? You're in Christ consciousness. You're an avatar, right? You have 12 strands activated. With 12 strands activated, you can levitate. You can appear and disappear at will. All right? Then they get mad. They get mad at me. Well, fine. And I have a lot of them do like this thing. In the name of Archangel Michael, I ban you from my life, right? Because I challenge their belief system. The flaming blue sword of Michael. And I was like, hey, excuse me, I only, asked you to like put the proof where your mouth is, that's all. And the only reason I do that to somebody is if they're displaying arrogance about it. Because if somebody's telling me out of one side of their mouth that they're in Christ consciousness, and out of the other side of their mouth they're patting themselves on the back and puffing their chest up and thinking how great they are compared to lowly little you, it's showing you they're not there. There's a lot of lip service going on in the New Age movement. And by the time you get done with this course, you'll be able to spot some of it. For those of you hardy souls who are also coming to the Templar course, you'll be able to spot a lot more. Okay? Because in the Templar course at this point, we're naming names of who's teaching what. And we're letting people know what ascension teachings are part of the original founders' teachings and what ones are not. And what ones are meant to trick you into using your energy in ways that's not good for you or the planet. But it stays pretty benign in Kathara healing. In Kathara healing, we deal with learning to be empowered again by getting back our consciousness, getting back an awareness of our body parts and how to use our mind to direct energy. One of the real interesting transitions I've found is, okay, once you know all this stuff, it's like a bicycle. You can learn how to ride it, right? And then you leave it parked against the side of the house and you keep walking to town every day. And he's saying, yeah, the bike's still there. I could ride it. Same thing here. If you can learn this stuff, but if you don't use it, we're taught here to use our consciousness in only a 3D way. So we look for the 3D solutions first. Once you learn Kathara healing, and you're having an issue come up in your life, or a healing issue come up in your life, instead of letting the autopilot kick in, where you just go run to the doctor and you put your book away and you're not even going to run any technique because you don't feel good. If you run the technique, it'll help you feel better. You have to get on the bicycle and ride it. So you can learn how to ride a bike. You can learn how to do Kathara healing. But the results, if you're going to find results, personal results, they're not going to come from parking the book on your shelf. They're going to come from getting to the point where you don't even need the book because you've integrated it, where you've learned how to do the techniques. See, it's the techniques. You can learn everything you want to around it, which is helping your mental body to expand so it can hold the frequency that you're trying to bring through. This is why we teach in detail, because your mental body is very important. It needs to know, or it will block out the rest of the frequencies coming in. So you'll learn your stuff, but then you apply it. The change comes with repetition of using the technologies, which are simple exercises, some not so simple, they have lots of steps. What's nice about Kathara healing too is, what starts out in the beginning, it's going to take you quite a few steps, and it's a pain in the neck to have to do it, frequently. Where, I even get like that, oh no, not my Maharic Seal again, that kind of stuff. However, if I want D12 frequency running through my body, I know I need to run my Maharic Seal. But the more you work with the techniques, the more shortcuts will come up, where you don't have to run a 26-step technique. You can get the same thing accomplished in 4. But you need to start with the long version to build the frequency, to get that imprint back in to your active template so it can be sent through the DNA. It's building critical mass. So that's why the stuff that starts out has quite a few steps to it. Eventually, after you get done with Kathara 1, you'll find that we've moved, since Kathara was given, we've moved into what's called a Maharic Quick Seal, where you literally can do what takes 26 steps in the beginning in like an instant, running a Maharic Seal. We'll talk about Maharic Seal as we get into more of the body of Kathara. But I want you to know in the beginning, so you don't get disheartened by saying, oh my God, 26 steps, I fall asleep on step 14. If you keep working with it, you'll get past step 14, and you'll find that you don't fall asleep until step 24. And then eventually you'll find, as your DNA activates to hold those frequencies, you actually make it all the way through the exercise. Then, the more you use it, you'll find your body takes over and does them. You'll be visualizing something, and all of a sudden you jump 4 steps ahead. And just keep up with yourself, because your body's integrated the technique that you've taught it. So it will teach you shortcuts and how to do it faster so you can get the same frequency running without having to go through all the steps. So instead of getting disheartened looking at 26 steps and saying, I can't do this for the rest of my life, you don't have to do this for the rest of your life. It's the beginning with any of these techniques. Once they're set into the body manually and energized, it's like watering a garden. Once you water them in the DNA template enough, eventually they will take hold and start to sprout on their own, where these frequencies will become a natural, awake part in your body. It's almost like having a part of you that really wants to come into body, but it keeps falling asleep on the job, and you have to use the manual techniques to keep waking and say, yo, you're coming down here, you're coming in my body. We're going to be one. Come on, soul, come into the body. When you work with it that way, eventually it stays awake. What you're doing is getting your DNA template to behave differently than it has since you were born, to behave differently than it has in your last 20 incarnations. So it takes a bit of time. If the planetary grids were perfect right now, and they were perfectly in their own divine blueprint, which they're not, they just started to be able to run D12 frequency back in. There's a lot of repair. If they were in good shape, we wouldn't have to spend so much time learning how to do these techniques. We'd do them once or twice and they'd stick, because the planetary grids themselves would help support that pattern in the body. But right now, what we're doing is we are actually resisting the planetary grids, because the planetary grids are still trying to send their distortions into the body. So whatever work you just did, in 12 hours, the planetary grids are going to hit a critical mass of energy in your body again and flip it back over to its mutated pattern, because the mutations are still in the planetary grids. It takes a lot longer time to completely clear a planetary grid than it does to clear your own body grid. So as long as you take responsibility to manually reset in your body the divine blueprint, you not only will be able to sustain more and more levels of DNA activation and DNA repair and getting more of your consciousness in body, but you'll progressively help the planet to heal its grids faster. Because just as the planet sends us energy into our bodies, we send energy back into the planet. Right now, we've been making each other sick for 25,000 years. If we begin these processes of healing the DNA, we will heal what we send back into the planetary grids. And each one of us is like a walking piece of the planet. If we get ourselves healed to a higher level, that piece of the planet becomes healed, which means the planet becomes more able to sustain healing for the whole race. So it's like a love affair between person and planet, where you realize you are an energy system, a spirit that is an energy system that has the ability, by the choices you make right now and each day, to directly affect the outcome of the whole. You can change a piece of the world, and you start with you. So there's a huge amount of growth that we can all get by working with the concepts and the teachings of the Kathara. They're sacred teachings, because you look at the word sacred and you think of, okay, well, sacred, that's the stuff like that religions teach you about, right? Or they're supposed to anyway. What does the Bible call sacred? What does the Koran call sacred? What do, Buddha traditions call sacred? Everybody has a different interpretation of sacred. What none of them tend to do, though, is they teach you about sacred, but not many of them, the Easterns do a little bit better, teach you how to get sacred into the body as a reality. These teachings are very sacred, because they are the teachings that all of the original sacred teachings were built on and edited from. So we're in the middle of a renaissance of consciousness, where we're moving toward one of two things, and it depends completely on the choices we make as to what we want to learn and what we don't want to learn. We are either moving into a genuine new age of enlightenment, more enlightenment than has been here in thousands and thousands of years, or we are moving toward a new dark ages, where we buy into a bunch of nonsense that's being put out right now, propaganda, false ascension mechanics, new age mumbo jumbo that has twists in it, traditional mumbo jumbo that was edited so long ago nobody remembers what the original was. If we have the courage to be open to learning the new information that's coming, that's really the old information being brought back, and have the courage to say, well, the Bible, I always taught was a holy book and a good book, but it turns out, wow, the Council of Nicaea took out, a good 90% of it. Gee, what was in those other teachings? You begin to look at the difference between the letter of the law as it's been fed to you in your culture and the spirit of the law, of what it was trying to tell you originally, before it was passed down through the hands of men so long, men, women, not being sexist here, to the point where the original truth and the spirit of it got lost. I have faith in people on this planet. When you show them, particularly with Kathara, the structure, how simple it actually is to reclaim. There's not a whole lot of mumbo jumbo. You don't have to read like 200 million volumes of some Eastern text that's being hidden by the Tibetans. It's really not that hard. Once you realize this, anybody, most people with common sense will say, yeah, really, that makes sense. That feels right. Because there's a part of each of us that remembers. There's a part of each of us that remembers right now, that's in the higher dimensional fields, that knows we're at one with Source. So this will resonate with the part deep inside, but there may be a lot of programs that sit over that part. If we've been raised strict Christian or strict Muslim or strict anything else, we're going to have to make a choice between dogma and new information. Did God die and doesn't talk to people anymore? This is how they treat those books. Once upon a time, God wrote books. Did he come down with a pen? No. He talked to people in their heads, and they wrote it down. Where'd the Bible come from? People don't ask the right questions in this society because they're not taught to. You go to a Christian church and you ask, well, okay, where'd the Bible come from? God wrote it. Okay. When? Well, they don't know either. They mean well. They're after the spirit. But they get so stuck on just the book, and they don't realize the book has been manipulated, and it's not just the Bible. Every religious text on this planet has been toyed with, messed with, and edited. So if we have the courage to move past dogma and into a natural curiosity of, okay, if there's more to it than that, what is it? And you start to apply that with these type of things that you can learn about your direct connection, you will grow. You'll grow probably so rapidly that your neighbors or your church group might think you're nuts, or they might tell you you're possessed by the devil. You know, people, there's some groups of people that are more attached to their dogma than they are to God. And that's sad, because the dogma, the religion, stands between them and God instead of being the vessel through which they can get into a relationship with God. You may find people like that get very judgmental. You know, I've had Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door, bless them. And I always like, you know, I don't discriminate against anybody. And they come and they say, oh, can we talk to you? And it's like, yeah, I know you want to convert me to being a Jehovah's Witness. Oh, no, we don't convert anybody. We just share our truth. Okay. You know, so I'd be nice. I let them come in. And because I figure, well, fair is fair, and you're going to share your truth, and that means I can share my truth with you too, right? Not, right? They come in. They would come into my house, very sweet people in the beginning, and and we'd have wonderful conversations about the nature of God and God being a loving God and all sorts of things, and we agreed wonderfully. And then they would come back to, do you call your God Jehovah? I said, well, I understand that a lot of people need to do that, but I don't need to call my God Jehovah to know that my God is with me in there. And immediately they turn into something else. That if they were like that when they first knocked on the door, you wouldn't let them in. I said, you're evil. You're possessed by Satan. You know, they turn into like these judgmental, mean people. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. You know, I invited you in my house because you wanted to talk to me. You're drinking my tea. You're sitting in my kitchen, and now you're calling me evil and calling me names. I think you can leave now. I mean, you may find as you grow spiritually and start to throw out some of the trash that you feel you don't need. I'm not going to tell you what you need and what you don't need. But as you grow to understand your relationship with Source and it expands in you, it'll start to edit itself. You'll start to tell yourself, I don't need that. That was an old belief. You know, I see where that doesn't work. You know, you'll get rid of stuff. But people who aren't ready to get rid of stuff yet, especially if they're close to you, will try to nail you down. It's like you're trying to fly and they're trying to nail your feet to the ground. And you will find this. Sometimes it will bring you pain. Sometimes the growth experience is painful because you will find yourself growing at a rate that is so much faster than the other people around you. And you will realize you've learned enough through yourself that you can never go back to looking at things the way they did. Once upon a time you might have shared those beliefs, so you understand where they were, but once you get behind them, you can never go back. Once you start to open the living Spirit of God inside of you and feel it through your own energy systems, and feel you're at oneness with Source, and realize God's not passing judgment on you. If anybody's going to judge you, it's only you. You can realize that you don't need those beliefs anymore, but if other people don't realize it, you will get tests. You will give yourself tests in your outer world to determine whether or not you've really integrated that teaching. Do you really believe that Spirit's alive in you and you can feel it and you really don't need that Bible anymore? You may have a whole year of people pumping Bible in your face on every dogma angle you can imagine, calling you names, making you feel bad. And the worst is when the universe sends to you someone who appears to have the same ideas, of the opposite gender perhaps, where you just feel, my perfect companion, we understand each other perfectly. And then all of a sudden you start to find, oh yeah, there's that Christian slant happening, and Christian's good, I'm a Christian. These teachings are Christian. These are Christian teachings because they're the original Essene Christian teachings. But you'll find dogma seeping in. And some of the ultimate tests that we put ourselves through are what means more to us. Our power and relationship and love that we have through Source, or trying to fill that gap by external relationship. And many times we'll be challenged with, are we willing to walk away from everything? It might be money, it might be houses, it might be people. Sometimes it might even be children. What means more to you? Your relationship with something out here in the hologram, or your relationship to God, is what the test comes down to. The funny thing is, I'll tell you how to solve the test from the beginning. Whatever it is, give it away. Let it go. Take Spirit first, your relationship to Spirit first, and you will get back whatever it is you thought you were losing, but in a much higher level. Yes, with interest. So this is the beginning of a journey. It's a journey that will take you into the core of your own spirituality, but in the beginning, it'll simply take you into an anatomy course, so you can learn about what you have to play with. You have wonderful energy systems that you can learn to direct energy through that will begin to give you your creative manifestation power back. So the big heavy stuff, it's out there, you'll grow into it. we'll take it now into the things that have to do with the context and the structure. Now, before I get into getting into the content, let's say, of the manual, I want to explain a couple things about the program itself. First of all, I want to reiterate that these teachings are considered Christian teachings because they are from the original Essene Christian texts that were translated by the person who became known as Jesus Christ, whose name was Jeshua. He was known as Jeshua Melchizedek. John the Baptist and Miriam were also part of the Essene team that translated these records. So they are the pure strain Christian teachings that were originally part of the Bible text. They were originally also part of the Koran. Before that was twisted, they were originally part of the Hindu text. They were originally part of the Buddhist text. They were part of all of the sacred texts on the planet once upon a time. So the things you're going to learn about now that are kind of exciting and fun, particularly when you learn that reality is a holographic projection and take it from there. These were the original spiritual science teachings that belong to everybody. Now, the Kathara Biospiritual Healing course, Level 1, is structured in a way where we're going to be working, first of all, with the D12 Maharata current, or the inner Christos current. We're going to learn processes that will culminate into being able to use something called a Maharic recoding process, which means we're going to be doing core template recoding using the D12 Divine Blueprint. The manual that you have, the Kathara manual, if you'll notice, there are two sets of page numbers in this manual. The first run along the bottom of the pages, and the second are only on some pages that are up. Okay, if you don't have them here, they say you're getting them tomorrow, you'll notice in these manuals, I'll explain what it is now anyway, there are two sets of page numbers. This is because this is not only a course where you're going to learn about this, it's also a teacher's course, which means this book will enable you to do what I'm doing right now, which is to teach a course in Kathara Healing. The first set of page numbers are the sequential page numbers of all of the text. The second set of page numbers that you will find in the upper right-hand corner at the top are a sequence that if you pull those out of the text and make a set of transparencies, they will give you the highlights of each chapter. And that is the most important information in each chapter, and it gives you all the graphs and those kind of things. So you will be able to, without too much difficulty, read the book, pull out those pages to make a set, like I actually make a set of transparencies and a set of paper copies of those transparencies. So you'll end up with a small book that is your teaching manual. So you can actually take this course and then go on to teach what you're learning. So it's not just, that way you're not dependent on us. You can become an independent Kathara teacher and healing facilitator. Yet by the end of Kathara Level 1, which I think we're going to probably finish up either tomorrow or early Sunday, depending on how fast we move with the material, because there's also the intro to Kathara Level 2 that you're going to get here. By the end of Kathara Level 1, you will be able to not only run the D12 current within your own template to begin clearing your own Kathara grid level. You also learn a process by which you can do client sessions, which means you can take this process, learn to use the processes in your body, and then do hands-on type spiritual healing facilitation is what we call it. When we talk about healing, the way it was always taught and what we teach in the Azurite Temple is you are not a healer to anybody but yourself. All right? What you can be, however, is a very good healing facilitator, which means you will help the D12 Christos avatar level of your client to orchestrate healing by helping their higher parts to ground the frequency. So I've met people in the healing professions that get this egomania. I'm a healer. I paid $10,000 for my certification and I'm so important. Oh, spare me. It's like, you're not going to get anywhere with that attitude. And I don't think, I can feel this with the consciousness in this room. This is a very high consciousness room, and you guys are going to be fun to work with. I don't think that's going to be a problem for the people in this room. But if you catch that with other people doing healing facilitations, just know it's a red flag as far as how good they really are at whatever it is they think they're doing. All right? You'll get to the point where you don't need to have an ego identification that, oh, I'm important now because I'm a healer. This is where people come from when they need to do that. You will learn that everybody is important. Everybody is an avatar trying to wake up. Once you know that you're blessed, once you know you are a spiritual being that's important, unique, and valued completely as literally an expressed face of God, you don't need an ego superiority complex to compensate for your inferiority complex. Okay? People that need to go spouting about how important they are the people that feel most pathetic inside of themselves. They really feel that they are worthless and worth nothing. So they create a personality construct to counteract that, where they go overboard with self-inflated importance in order to make their inner self feel better, so they feel like they have a purpose and a meaning. You'll run into people in all walks of life like that. And one of the saddest ones are the ones that are in the spiritual professions and within the healing professions. Because what they are doing is misunderstanding the whole process, which means they can't use it very well. So we're going to learn things as we go along about the attitudes that go along with healing facilitation, where you'll be more proud of yourself being a healing facilitator than you ever would if you call yourself a healer. You will be a healer of yourself, and the part of yourself that you're going to use is your own D12 consciousness. When you run D12 current through your body, what you are doing is beginning the process of bringing your avatar consciousness and its frequency into your body. It'll take a while before your identity will start to change. You will start to really begin to know yourself as an avatar. What that means is you first of all give yourself permission to not be afraid of your own greatness. Some of us go overboard on the humility aspect, where, oh, I'm just a pathetic, lowly little being, and I'm just humble in service to God, and I'm a martyr, and that kind of stuff. That's as bad as the other. Both of them are missing the point that you are a blessed being, you are an avatar. As you grow to become an avatar and begin to healing facilitate like an avatar would, you will start to love yourself. And that is allowed. In our societies, we're taught to never look at ourselves as good enough, to always feel something's wrong with us, where we didn't quite make the grade, we weren't pretty enough, we weren't smart enough, we weren't intelligent enough, we weren't rich enough, we weren't in the right place at the right time enough. You'll find that you are enough. You'll find that you are absolutely lovable right now exactly how you are, even if you don't have the job you'd like to have ideally, even if you're in a body that's too skinny or too fat or too old or too young for whatever it is you think you'd like to create. You will learn to accept yourself and love yourself as you are. And that is the gift you will bring to any clients who come to you for facilitation. You can only give to another person what you have inside of you to begin with. Think about that in terms of frequency. If you're an energy pattern and all the good stuff and the confused stuff that you carry around inside of you, that's your energy pattern. When you begin to run energy as a healing facilitator to assist others, you are giving them a part of that pattern temporarily. Now, you're not going to give them your energy signature, but your energy signature will affect their thought field. If you come in with low self-esteem, you will be giving them a kick in their own low self-esteem. If you come in with ego issues, you'll be giving them a kick in their own ego issues. So a true healing facilitator realizes that in order to be the best they can possibly be, they must really be the best. You can't fake it. And people will know, even if they don't know here. There's a lot of people that run healing scams. You see a lot of this under the guise of Christianity, which is really pathetic. I know one person, bless her, she does workshops, and she does the breath of the Holy Spirit. And she goes up and calls a person out of the audience. Of course, she talked to them before and paid them a little on the side. And she does her incantation thing, and then goes, and blows on their forehead. And they fall down, right? And they kind of bounce around on the floor for a while, and then they get up and, oh, I'm cured. My leg is fixed, or my head is fixed, or I know I don't have my cancer anymore. And this person runs this, and there's people that pay her huge amounts of money to go to her workshops. And I went to one just to see, because she happened to be giving one at the same time I was. And I sat in there, and I'm watching this lady. I'm watching her biofields, which is something you'll learn to do. You'll learn to switch to D4 vision and say, okay, what are they really doing? What are they really running? She couldn't run anything more than three-dimensional current. She was just faking. This isn't what you want to be. And none of you, I think I could feel, there's a vibe, none of you would want to be that. You'd be ashamed of yourself if you were. So you would never let yourself do that. But there are people out there. There might be people you know. There might be people that have done healing work on you because you thought that they could help you with something. They may have brought to you things into your energy fields that you didn't want, that you didn't know they brought. Some of them won't even know that they brought those things into your field. When you work with the Kathara Healing Program, as we're going to work, you're going to learn what it means to have integrity as a healing facilitator. If a person doesn't know dimensional structure, they're not going to know what currents they're running. If they're not knowing what currents they're running, they're not going to know what they're doing in energy. So they assign it to somebody up there that will help them. Maybe it's God, maybe it's the Holy Spirit, maybe it's Archangel Gabriel. Maybe it's one of those ET things. You never know, because people don't know where the energy is coming from when they're doing healing facilitation unless they've had exposure to primal structure teachings. You will know what primal order is. It will put you in a category of healing facilitators that is a new category. It's the resurrection, the carrying of the torch and the relighting of the torch of what was once the old, ancient way of the angelic human. You'll be like a first generation of the torchbearers coming back again, resetting the pattern of integrity in the healing practice. Now, it's going to be a journey for everyone. If you get lost tonight, which I don't think you will, but just in case, because I'm going to probably I'll go at a moderate rate. If I go at a really fast rate, I'll lose everybody, including myself. So with this stuff, because this stuff I like to take these subjects kind of slow and piece by piece, because if you run through them fast, like I tend to talk when I get on a flow, it's like it goes by so fast, your ears heard it and it went out the other side and it didn't stop anywhere in between, so you don't get it. So I'll try to take these subjects in a moderate pace. You'll probably find by tomorrow evening, as I'm trying to calculate how we're going to fit the new material that's been being given over the weekend to add to the Kathara 2 that wasn't originally supposed to be part of this workshop, but since it's being given now, I want to give it to you. You'll find my pace pick it up. Where you may find me going, but when that happens, it will already be, we started at this pace, your consciousness will move with mine. When I give workshops, I'm transmitting frequency as well as transmitting words. The funny thing is, everybody's transmitting frequency when they transmit words, but most people just don't know it. It happens subconsciously. The information contained in Kathara Healing goes anywhere from D4 frequency up into about D9 frequency. So you will find when things accelerate, you'll find that we're picking up. We started at D4 information and it started to go faster. And then things got faster and they started to go up to D7 and then we're at D9 and you're like out there, but you're still getting it, right? You're still getting it. And then we come back down, like go home for the night or do break, come back and go, what did I just get? What did we talk about an hour ago? I don't remember. Right? This is because when you are in a workshop that is doing an upscale in frequency, your DNA is responding to that frequency. I'm transmitting frequency. When Az speaks, he's transmitting frequency to you. You're listening, and your DNA is listening. That frequency triggers little temporary activations in your DNA template. That's what allows you to understand. If I was saying something at a real high frequency that your DNA couldn't temporarily activate enough to pick up, you wouldn't even hear me. I'd be just like lip syncing. You wouldn't even hear sound coming out of my mouth. So your DNA is going to be taking this workshop with you, which means you're going to have temporary little DNA activations that will take you up maybe into 4th strand activation, or at least most people are on the 3rd strand activation right now, moving into 4th. What this will do is go into the subharmonics. If we're doing D7 information, the 7th out of 12 subharmonic will be activating in your first 3 strands. If we go up to D8 transmission, the 8th subharmonic will be activating. Because right now, if your full 8th strand activated to keep up with it, you'd blow up. Because you have to get your body cells used to the frequency. But what will happen with this, and don't think it's strange, when we're speaking and going through the workshop, you may be surprised, well, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me, yeah, I'm getting it. I didn't know if I would get that, but yeah, I'm getting it. And then you go home and you find you don't got it at all. It's like, where did it go? I must have left it under my chair in the workshop room, because you can't for the life of you remember things you knew made sense to you when you were in the workshop. I want you to know about this ahead of time so you don't pick on yourself or think anything's wrong. What happens is the subharmonics in your DNA that activated to allow that frequency to come in, so you did understand there, well, the frequency is not being transmitted into the room you're in anymore. So the DNA goes back to its usual level. Now eventually, your DNA will stay there, and so will the awareness, where you'd be able to run it off, like I run it off now, a lot of it off the top of my head, because I got it, I've integrated it, it's embedded in my DNA now. But until it gets embedded through critical mass of being exposed to the frequency and the information, you will find that when the frequency stops coming at you from the outside, you'll go back to where you were before, and only pieces of the information will stick. But then the next time, more pieces will stick. And the more you read the book, more pieces will stick. So don't feel that, I guess I'm telling you that to try to overcome the confusion that can happen, that it made sense to you before and then all of a sudden you lost it. A lot of people have really kind of gone, I'm really bummed. I'm really upset. I thought I understood something, but no, I don't. I'm all confused. If you feel confused after the fact, consider that normal. They say, oh, that's just my DNA template. Okay. It'll come back into activation more. Once you're not in a workshop, the books, the written material, hold those same frequencies. That's why we go to painstaking detail into these things and putting it all down on paper in as greatest detail as we can. Because every detail, every word, every letter, every sentence carries more of the frequency bridge that will stimulate, when you read it, your DNA template that will allow you to hold the information more until you can hold it permanently in your biofield. So I wanted to let you know about that. And I also wanted to let you know a cue as to when we're going into higher spaces, when I start to talk really fast. I'm learning to modulate that so it doesn't happen, but I tend to just go and let my Holy Spirit part of me move through, and I don't think about controlling how I'm speaking, I just speak. So you'll notice when we start to go faster, that's that little cue she said, we're going into higher strand activation, subharmonic activations here. So just be aware of it. I will try to be sensitive to you. Now, we're going to get into subject matter, and I'm going to purposely slow down just a bit. The context of healing. This is the framework, the structure of the unified field, and the multidimensional anatomy of form. That doesn't mean just your body form. It means all form. What we're going to talk about in this section are several things. One thing called the holographic template. Another, the structure of dimensions. Something called Partakai phasing, which I have to move really slowly with words through that. And I read it right off the text, because if I don't, I will lose all of us. Then matter density. These are the key things that make the bridge in your mind so you can understand how things go from being in a non-manifest state to how they literally, rationally, there's a real process here by which they come into a densified state. So you'll learn that. And again, these were in the Bible. I'd like to send a copy to the Pope and say, would you mind teaching this? Yeah, right. This one. Universal and planetary Kathara grids. The 12-tree Kathara centers and lines, scalar shields, crystal seals, and dyadic points. Now these are the primary pieces of universal anatomy that translate absolutely directly into your personal anatomy as well. The universe has them, the galaxies have these anatomy parts, the planets and stars have those parts, and so does your body and the body of anything else in manifest form. So in this section, we're going to explore these things on the universal level. So we understand the context. This applies to the macrocosm and the microcosm. We get into the universal and internal Templar complexes, which Templar refers to the temple pillar, the temple of spirit, and the pillar of primal life force current, or spirit or God that moves through you and creates the vehicle of the three-dimensional manifestation, Templar. Templar applies to your personal inner Templar, and it applies to the planetary Templar, galactic, universal Templar. So Templar mechanics are what we're learning here. These will go into eventually, by the end of this course, what's called Merkaba mechanics. But this is Merkaba like you've never had it taught. There's a couple other Merkaba teachers out there. And, well, let's just say there are little Merkaba vehicles and there are big ones. We're going to teach you about the big ones because they direct the little ones. We'll teach you what Merkaba really is, because that word gets bounced around all over the place in the New Age movement. And I've had a few people say, okay, I've done this. I've been doing Merkaba exercises from so-and-so for like 3 years now. What is Merkaba really? They've been doing the exercises, but nobody taught them exactly what it is. Merkaba is a word that people have been using in the New Age movement falsely to say, oh, it's just a vehicle of light and sound that ascended masters can use to move from one dimension to another, as if only ascended masters have Merkaba vehicles. They fail to tell you that Merkaba fields and Merkaba vehicles are an intrinsic part of all matter structures. They're in your DNA as well as surrounding your body. So what we're going to learn here is going to take us by the end of this course to where we understand what Merkaba really is and how to use it. Because Merkaba mechanics, Merkaba healing is one of the most powerful forms of healing when it's based on Kathara healing. Now, Kathara implies using the divine blueprint, the D12 divine blueprint, and the currents associated with it. When you combine that with true knowledge of Merkaba, you come out with some very, very powerful healing technologies. We won't talk about Merkaba much here, but we will by the end of this course. I'm going to try to get you from here to here, which is basically in the textbook from page like 1 to 47. On the lower numbers. We'll see. If I have to break early, depending on how much I get into these, and I try to feel out how much I need to talk on each one, depending on the feel of the room. I can feel if people are getting lost and confused. It's like a tension feeling that goes like a wave that comes up to me and goes, help. So if I feel that, and I can feel like blank spots, like, you have like, everybody's here like little lights lighted up, and you get to a point where you're going out of their space, where you're confusing people, and they start to go off like light bulbs. Uh-oh, losing them. So if I have to go slowly, and it's going to be for the average, frequency that's coming from the room, so everybody has a chance. The ones that could get it really fast and the ones that'll take a while. You're all avatars trying to wake up. All right? You're all loved and blessed, and you're the same, you may be at a different level of understanding at the moment, but you're all at the same level of pure and perfect potential as avatars. So that will be respected, and we will find the average mean to try to serve both. Okay, if I have to break, I would probably break here, because this is the tough part, getting this across. And if I can get this across, this stuff comes in pretty easy. Now, there's a level of detail in the manual that when you get your manuals, you'll find the level of detail is painstaking on some of it. Where it not only teaches you about a Kathara grid, but it goes into like all these minute little pieces of it, things that I still have to go back to, because they're things that we won't use directly here, but it helps to know that they exist. I'm not going to take 20 minutes to cover these things. I'll let you know. I'll say like, okay, this is part of this, this is part of this. We're going to use this, just so you know that's there. But that stuff, if you want to learn more about it, it'll be in your text. But as far as the important things that are going to get you by tomorrow to be able to begin the hands-on process, because probably somewhere around tomorrow afternoon, I think, we will be ready to begin the hands-on process where we're not just learning about the structure, we start to run frequency in our bodies. We start to do technique. And that's the body of the course. It helps a lot to understand what you're doing when you do technique. So you don't just think, oh, it's another meditation to run frequency. I've got millions of those out there in the New Age movement. You'll know exactly what these techniques are for. So when you do them, you'll do them with conviction, because you'll know you're doing something important within your body systems. Tomorrow afternoon, I hope to start that process. So in the meantime, I'm going to try to get you through these. Chapter 1, which is the context, ends with something called the transduction sequence and holographic reality construction. Creation mechanics is another way to phrase that. This is a very, very introductory, really it's a chart that shows you the process by which units of consciousness form progressively through various stages and structures of primal order into what we call the manifest hologram of reality. Now, we will just touch on that as we move through the end of Chapter 1. When we get to Chapter 2, that's when the fun starts, when we start to find out where our Kathara grids are located, where these energy centers are in our body, and how they all interact with each other. So we get some functional control and understanding over our own body vehicles. The new information that I'd mentioned a little bit before, that isn't part of the Kathara manual yet. It's literally, they were giving it to me all day. Actually, I was getting it all day in transmission. It's going to be added to the intro to Kathara 2 that's already in the manual. We will cover that, I hope. I'm going to have to make time for that, which usually isn't in the workshop framework schedule because this is all new. But I want to bring it to you because it picks up where this leaves off with a transduction sequence, and it gets into the mechanics of manifestation in its basic terms, but literally to the point where we're talking about quarks moving into muons and mesons and moving into electrons and protons and building up into things we call matter and how that works in the body and how that works in relation to Merkaba and the DNA template. So when we touch on this, just remember, there's more to come on that stuff at the end. What it's going to be, I don't even know. I mean, it feels like there's probably 100 more pages of this, which I won't have time to get down here. So you'll at least get the most important aspects of it, because there will be 2 more techniques that are going to be brought to you that aren't in the manual yet, and they have to do with something called VECA codes. Now, VECA codes are extremely important parts of the Kathara technology that we were only just given information on starting in September. Since September, the group in Sarasota, Florida, has been given, one at a time, 6 different mathematical code programs to work with advancing healing in the body. And there's not been any text given. We've been given the symbols and a basic explanation of how to use them and what they're for, knowing they're important, but realizing there's a whole tome of information about why these are important. We're beginning to get that tome of information. We're beginning to get an understanding of the VECA codes, how they apply to Merkaba, how that applies to Kathara, and how we can begin to use it. Because they are the most powerful technologies that are available when combined with the Kathara grid technologies. They're using them in Florida now. So I didn't want to come up here and not be able to give them to you. But instead of just giving you how to use the exercises, we're also getting the whole, what they mean and what it's all about. So that's what's at the end that I'm going to, I'm making room to put into the book. And as long as Kinko's or Staples cooperates, and I get this in written form fast enough to get it printed and everything, you'll have the printed matter as well. But you will be learning VECA code techniques as well as the end of Kathara 2. So you didn't end up with people down in the States using VECA codes and you've never heard of them. I wanted to keep you up to speed. So what I'm saying is you're going to learn more in this Kathara class than the first Kathara class was learned when Kathara first came out. Okay, we can go to the next one, please.
I wasn't minded to bring 20, yeah, I know it's a relief. I wasn't minded to bring 20 cents to the Becker Code class.
Yeah, 20?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why, but well,
Good, I'll talk about it, when we get into those. There we go. Now this is the part I will read to you and then explain what that meant. It's a little, can we twist that just a little left? Thank you. Yeah. Just over that way. Yeah. Just so the type is straight. Yeah, I can read better if the type is straight. Okay. Now, I think the easiest way to do this, and this is how I've always done it when I've taught these parts, and I'll recommend it to anybody who's planning to teach this. If you're going to, at some point decide, okay, I'm going to go teach a Kathara workshop. These are put this way where you can see the big letters, the big paragraphs up there, so you can read it to people and then fill in and describe more of it, because it helps. It helps orient your brain as to the small detail, and it also helps to get people oriented. Plus, what you started talking about, they can go back and look at in their own text if they get lost somewhere in the process. So I will start by reading it, and then I will fill in more of what that means. All right? Now, so the holographic template, that is the template upon which the hologram of matter is manifest. You're part of the hologram of matter, and so is everything else that you perceive. What's very interesting is it's all stationary. Space and time don't actually move. Time doesn't move forward. It actually just all sits in the same place, but it appears to move because of the interaction of energy through the fixed templates of matter. Now, external reality is a holographic projection. Perception of solidity and externalization are determined by the oscillation rates, movement rates. We have vibration and oscillation of waves. By the oscillation rates between dimensionalized units of consciousness. Dimensionalized units of consciousness that are called partikai, particay, and particum. These are particles that science doesn't know are there yet. They're actually pre-particles. They're things that happen before what we call particles happen. I've met one physicist that is dealing with some underground collective of physicists in the States, and they just gave me the creeps because of the, let's say, secrecy that they're playing with. We're aware of particum. that word, they were aware of it. I thought it was a word that was just given with these texts. They're doing some kind of research that has to do with trying to figure out how to do time travel that has to do with particum units. What they didn't know was that particulae and particae go with them, which is kind of interesting. So these are not imaginary particles that we just made up words for. They are actual units of consciousness that exist as the first foundation building blocks that all the other structures that build up to matter are composed of. All right. Dimensionalized units of consciousness form frequency bands, bands of frequency, like the frequency that carries your radio waves or your TV waves. So, dimensionalized units of consciousness, particae, particae, and particum, create frequency bands that exist in specific relationship to each other. So there is a specific order and relationship to frequency bands within universal order. We perceive as solid the frequency bands that exist one full dimensional band below the frequencies within which the consciousness is stationed. That means what we're perceiving here as physically solid, if we are at strand 3 DNA template activation, our consciousness is stationed in D3. That means what we're seeing as solid is the unified field and the shapes of energy that are in it that are in D2, dimension 2. This is very interesting because if you want to see what's in dimension 5, it implies you have to go to dimension 6 consciousness, which implies you have to go to 6th DNA strand template activation. So you can process in your body 6th-dimensional frequency. So this is the beginning of understanding what consciousness is doing when it perceives, as well as understanding the greater framework that we all exist within to be in a manifest hologram. Okay. Dimensionalization, the process of energy being broken down into dimensions, creates the structure through which consciousness can perceive the hologram of externalization. That means that if consciousness, if Source, if God, didn't create a structure of taking parts of its consciousness and breaking them down and moving them in relationship to each other, creating dimensionalization, if that dimensional structure wasn't created, three-dimensional hologram would not be seen. We would not have the opportunity to perceive externalization, which implies that the real condition of reality is not manifest. It is pure cognition, beyond form. But form and matter and density and time and space are illusions, perceptual illusions, that can take place when consciousness moves itself into certain structures, energy structures, dimensions. Allow us to perceive a hologram that's very, very solid when you're focused in it, until you learn to play with it, and it becomes less and less solid, and you realize you're sitting in the middle of a thought form. That gets fun. It takes a while. It's usually about 4.5 strand activation before you can sit in a room and it comes on you, kind of like a breeze, where you start to, did I catch that? Did the walls actually do this for a second? Yes, they did. You're starting to see through the frequency bands that are making up the solid form because your consciousness is jumping up to another level. So you're starting to see that the matter forms are not as solid as they appear when you're fully stationed here. So there's a lot of things that we have to look forward to. Some things that will make our hair stand on end as we're going through. Ah, it disappeared. Yes, it did. It came back. Thank goodness. You know, I mean, it can be like the road in front of you when you're driving. You know, which can get real scary. You know? But as long as you know that your avatar consciousness is with you when these things are happening, even if you don't know what to do with it, your avatar does, and you'll be okay. You're being trained, and your consciousness is being stretched. Your perceptions are being stretched through your DNA activating if you start to get weird effects like that. Weird effects are part of the norm when we're expanding our consciousness into multidimensional consciousness back into our avatar selves. Okay. Now, the human body is a hologram. God, I'm so glad to know that. And that means like it's not really as stuck as it seems. Okay, it is a hologram built upon a holographic template of units of consciousness, to particae, particae, and particum, that are structured into scalar standing wave grids. Scalar standing wave grids. A scalar grid is like a mathematical fixed grid of energy points. You could make a scalar of a map, let's say, by putting a light for each little point on a map. And every little location on that map is a very specific coordinate. It's a coordinate point. It's a scalar. Now, in relation to dimensions, in relation to consciousness and units of consciousness. Scalar wave grid means there is, let's say, a template that's made of standing waves of light and sound. A standing wave is a columnar wave, so it's like a column of light when it's turned on that's in a fixed position. The position is fixed by a vibration. Okay? When the vibration undergoes a certain change, it becomes an oscillation, which is different than a vibration. We'll get into that in a minute. When the vibration goes into oscillation, the unit of particle, unit of sound, turns on and becomes a unit of light. When we're talking about scalar standing wave grids, we're talking about a grid. You could look at it as a field of light bulbs that, when they are in their vibrational state, are turned off, like the switch is off. And when they are in their oscillating state, which is the state when the matter hologram flashes on, the switch is thrown, the light bulbs come on. Now, if you ever saw the old marquees that they used to have for theaters and things like that, where you'd have the series of lights, where you'd have light bulbs, and they were all in a fixed position, but they were triggered on a sequence where one would turn on, and then the next one would turn on, and that one would turn off, and they would move in a certain sequence that would make it look as if the light was moving, like a circle of light around the billboard or the marquee that they were trying to highlight. The light bulbs didn't move. They just appeared as if they were moving. What happens in the scalar standing grids that the hologram is built upon? The hologram isn't moving. The lights are shutting off and on in sequence. And what we perceive as linear progression and movement through time is actually the same type of illusion of watching those light bulbs do their thing to make the circle of light moving around a marquee. We're watching scalar standing waves turn off and on, going from vibration, which is a contraction, to oscillation, which is an expansion, going from what's called base magnetic to base electrical, off and on, going from sound off to light on. It is a wave, a unified field of energy that's composed of fixed wave points that consciousness moves itself through. And in moving through those fixed points of waves, it turns some of them on. When the consciousness moves through, the waves turn on, the hologram appears. When the consciousness moves into the next wave and out of that one, the one behind it turns off, becomes memory, and the illusion rolls forward as if you're moving forward in time. It's the consciousness that's actually circulating through a standing wave grid, rather than us moving and our bodies moving from one place to another in time. We're actually all standing still. Okay. So, anyway, I won't take that too much further in this discussion. Okay. All right, can we pull this up just a little, Larry, please? Can we just pull this up just a little, please? Okay. So remember, standing scalar wave grids, that's not too hard to understand, right? Just little light bulbs turning off and on. Okay. If we can understand a grid like a piece of plywood with light bulbs on it, each on a different switch that turns off and on, and they're synchronized. So there's a mathematical program that governs when they turn off and when they turn on to create certain holographic effects. That's what we're in the middle of. That's what we're made of. That is the form that our consciousness takes on. When our consciousness decides to individuate, our consciousness is in a state of at-one-ment with God at all times. And it chooses to take a part of itself into individuation to experience life and dimensionality as me, whoever me is, whatever me you decided you wanted to be when you were coming in. You literally, as pure consciousness, choose to take on the energy form of standing scalar waves in very specific ordered patterns, mathematical geometrical patterns that allow you to experience your holographic world and your holographic body. All right, let's see. Okay, anyway, back to the words. See what I mean by I'll read part of it and then explain that and then go back and read it? It anchors people back into what they can go look that up. What was that again? All right. Okay, so I'll read that all in one sentence so you know what it means now. The human body is a hologram built upon a holographic template of units of consciousness structured into standing scalar wave grids, light bulbs, that represent the living morphogenetic field, form-holding blueprint upon which matter and dimensionalized consciousness manifest. So there's some of the basic things about understanding reality. First of all, you need to realize it's a hologram. Now the mind and the programming we've been given will tell you, that doesn't make any sense. Holograms aren't real. This is obviously real. If I go stand out in front of a car, I get splattered. That's very real. Yes, it is. Unless you know how to modulate your DNA very quickly and effectively, if you go out and stand in a car in your physical body, unless you blink your physical body out of there and get it out of the same light bulb program that the car is in, you will get flattened. The trick in that situation, and a lot of others, would be to get your body running on a different sequence of light bulbs turning off and on than the car is in, which means you would move from the dimensional time field that you're in into another one in order to avoid the car hitting you. This gives you a clue as to what it means to time travel, what it means to appear and disappear, what it means to activate DNA to a level where you're no longer trapped in a mortal body. It has to do with understanding light bulbs. They're a very good analogy, because if you can remember something that comes easy that you've known since you were little, and apply that to a big concept, where the big concept is made easy enough through the analogy, it'll stick better in your mind. If you can think of scalar waves as a light bulb grid that turn, with light bulbs turning off and on, that'll help you understand the next part that we're going to get into, which is called flash line sequences. Okay, can we go to the next one, please? Okay, now, to understand flash line sequences, we need to understand the light bulb concept. To understand the light bulb concept in a way that we go beyond thinking just light bulbs and glass things around them and little strands of metal inside of them and physical technologies, it will help a little bit to understand what those standing scalar waves, what those light bulbs are made out of, which are the units of part chi, part k, and part cum. This chart, and it's really all summarized very well on this chart. You don't have to be a physicist and know a billion different particle names to understand the foundation units that are most important, because all the other structures are built on them. We have units of consciousness, morphogenetic fields, and scalar grids. The units of consciousness, part chi, part k, part cum, they group to form morphogenetic fields, which are scalar grids. Now, number one here says part chi, part k, and part cum are the smallest units of energy substance. They're primal substance. They are electrotonal, means they have a light electrical frequency equivalent and a tone vibration frequency equivalent. Electrotonal really means they oscillate and vibrate. All right, they have the potentiality to oscillate and vibrate, electrotonal. The electrotonal units of consciousness that are the building blocks of morphogenetic fields. Morphogenetic field would simply be, you could look at it as the thought form field behind a manifest object. It's also a very specific construct that we'll talk about some as we go along and more at the end of the course when we get into understanding something called chelons and morphogenetic fields that actually form a construct of crystallized scalar waves that form what's called the crystal body. Now we get introduced to the word chelons over here. So we have morphogenetic fields, which are the beginning blueprints of matter, that are formed of part chi, part k, and part cum. And the part chi, and it's really the foundation particles that create what's called antimatter. Now antimatter is a light field. It is not an antimatter. That's a different thing. Out of a part chi unit, the part chi break apart, okay, which means you have one waveform, and actually it's a vibration at this point. It pulses, which means it breaks itself apart and turns, each little wave piece turns itself away from each other, and this is where light is created. You have a part chi, the part chi becomes a part cum unit, which is considered base magnetic or base vibrational, and a part k unit, which is base oscillation. This would be base sound, base pre-sound, base pre-light. This would be matter, base sound, antimatter, base light. This is literally the particle formations that begin the process of taking consciousness, combining units of consciousness into waveforms that progressively build up into the scalar grids that form the templates of matter. Now, secondly, we go from part chi, and part cum units into part chi grids, the fabric of morphogenetic field structure. So if you take bunches of those little guys in their standing fixed form, put bunches of them together following very specific mathematical organization, they form grids of standing scalar waves. But at this point, they are still singular dimensional. They begin to group. Partakai will collect more partakai near them. Partakai will collect more partakai, and particum will collect more particum, and they begin to accrete or pull more of like kind to themselves, to the point where they fill out into grids. Now these grids are actually preset. And the stages that we talk about, it goes from this to this to this, they're actually stages that all exist at once. They're just different points of phases of development, just like it applies to you as well. Who you are right now, at age whatever you are right now, you are one, let's say, flashed on light bulb. The person you were when you were 10 years old, or the person you were at conception, the person you will be when you pass out of manifestation, whatever way you choose to do that, they all exist right now. Okay? You could say you're like one set of Partakai units, but they're connected to a whole grid. Time works this way. Time and space are intimately connected. You will perceive space-time as your consciousness moves through sets of scalar waves composed of these things. The most important thing to understand for now is that these are the foundation primal substance units that all of the other structures we're going to talk about are created from. So if I say, okay, you have a chakra system and it looks like this, well, what's it made of? It's made of this stuff, primal substance. There are several phases of primal substance where it moves from being Partakai units, singular standing waves, into groups of standing waves that draw toward each other. They become Partakai grids. They draw more of these units of consciousness from source. Now you have to remember, this is all coming from source energy, okay? God, source, whatever you want to call that, primal force of intelligence that always exists. Send streams of consciousness into this framework, and those streams of consciousness first take on these forms, and those forms fill out to make the standing scalar wave grids. These grids then accrete more of that consciousness coming in from source and keeps organizing it along the mathematical pattern, going from units or wave patterns into combinations of wave patterns into three-dimensional wave patterns. Now here's a word that's really important as we begin to enter the realm of high science. High science isn't what's practiced here on the planet right now, so you don't have to worry about dealing with the science here at the moment. Kelons. The word kelons refers to these grids that pull in more of the consciousness of source and begin to organize it in three-dimensional sets, where you would have one group of scalar waves, say, going on this rhythm, another group going on this rhythm, and another group going on this rhythm, where you have three different rhythms of scalar waves turning on and off, of Partakai units phasing. Now in a minute we're going to talk about Partakai phasing. What the concept of Partakai phasing means. They phase. They pass from Partakai units and they break apart into their next phase to become Partakai and Particum, which goes from antimatter to make antimatter and matter, and then they phase back and go back into their original Partakai antimatter unit. So phasing is really the turning on and off of the light bulbs. When the light bulb is off, it's in Partakai state. When the light bulbs turn on, they go into Particum and Partakai, matter and antimatter states. So the hologram flashes on here, flashes off there. This is the oscillation state, that's the vibration state. As we go along, we'll learn that these things that are actually one-dimensional to begin with become two-dimensional grids and then three-dimensional grids, and the thing that makes a difference between dimensions is the flash line sequence, the Partakai phasing rhythm. If they all went on the same rhythm, which means all the light bulbs flashed on at once and then flashed off at once, you'd have a one-dimensional reality field. You would not be able to perceive a three-dimensional hologram. What allows a three-dimensional hologram to be created is the fact that Partakai units are broken down into different mathematical programs. One is told to flash this often, another is told to flash this often, another is told to flash this often. This means there are sets of three rhythms. Okay? You have one rhythm that'll create one frequency of dimension, one dimension, okay? One flash line rhythm, which is flash line is that line of light bulbs, how often it will turn off and on and in what sequence. You have another one that will create another dimension, another one that will create another dimension. That's called the flash line sequence. That's the flash line of the Partakai phasing when they go from antimatter, part of chi, to part of cum and part of k, and back again. So it's really light bulb or standing wave, turning off and on. How fast it's going to do that in relation to its neighbors. Because this is a grid. There's bunches of scalar waves. So what you have is bunches of scalar waves turn on and off at different rhythms in sets of 3 different rhythms. The sets of 3 different rhythms allow an effect to be created where the units of consciousness that continue to be fed in from source, from God, enter the 3 different rhythms, and they begin to fill out on that on the single-dimensional part of chi grid. They begin to fill out, first becoming 2-dimensional and then 3-dimensional. They crystallize. They form crystallized units of consciousness. They form chelons. Chelons are the next step in the building blocks of matter. It goes from single-dimensional part of chi units into 2-dimensional part of k and part of cum, which form grids, and that goes into chelons. Now again, we're talking about standing light waves, light and sound waves. But at this point, they're crystallized waves, where they're actually waves that turn off and on, but they have a crystalline, 3-dimensional crystalline form. This is why we can experience 3-dimensional reality. They each have a different relationship to each other. It's not just how often those lights are going to sequence or turn off and on. It's what angle, if you have one line going this way, what angle is the next line coming through if you have 3 lines, flash lines, 3 lines turning on and off at different rhythms. It's not just the different rhythm, but it's also what angular relationship exists between each of those lines. It's like if you were going to draw it on a piece of paper. One line goes this way, one line goes this way, and one line goes this way. So you have 3 different angles of intersection that allow the units of consciousness of source to pass through, become part of chi and part of k and part of cum, go into the part of chi grids. Is the 3 angles of intersection as well as how fast they flash on and off that allow the crystallization of 3-dimensional matter to occur. Okay, yes?
There's some distortion.
Is this distorting? I'm sorry, what's it doing?
Sounds like the battery.
That fixed. Thank you very much for the quick return on the battery there. All right, so we talked about part of chi, part of k, and part of cum, the basic units of consciousness that begin to build up and accrete or pull together to form the structures that will be the building blocks and the foundations of matter, the matter templates. We went from part of chi, part of k, part of cum, to groups of them that form standing scalar wave grids, part of chi grids, that have a relationship of 3 different flashing on and off rhythms and 3 different angles of intersection that create chelons, which are crystallized scalar wave patterns. They are still fixed, but they are chelons, as opposed to chelons are 3-dimensional, solidified crystallizations that begin to create energy fields around and within themselves that allow for the holographic projection process to begin. Okay, we're going on the next one, please. What am I doing? 47, what am I doing? Okay. Now, we're going to talk about the structure of dimensions, which is totally interwoven with what we were just talking about as far as scalar wave grids, part of chi, part of k, and part of cum, flashing off at different rhythms of flash to each other. Now, what is a dimension? In traditional terms, dimension, the word dimension, is used really to describe other characteristics of a something else that's a noun. Like you have dimensions of consciousness. You have a dimension of this, like you're measuring something. This house has this dimensions. We use dimension in terms of it is a specific noun. It is an ism. It is a thing unto itself. Okay? Now when we talk about dimensions, these points help us to understand what they are. The unified field, which is the unified field, the scalar grid of the universe, the unified field of energy, is built upon dimensionalized sets of scalar standing wave points, wave strata. What does that mean? It means dimensionalized sets, I'll get into that in a minute, of the scalar standing wave grids. Now they are dimensionalized. Down here we'll get into what does dimensionalized mean. It means that each set has a different flash line rhythm and a different angle of intersection. So technically, we have a 15-dimensional system. Those 15 dimensions are broken down into sets of 3 dimensions each, giving us 5 systems with 3 dimensions each, 5 3-dimensional systems. A dimension is one flash line sequence. To keep it simple, if you think in terms of the light bulbs, a line of light bulbs turning off and on, and you have, let's say, a whole piece of plywood with 100 light bulbs on it, but they all have their nice little orderly rows. One dimension would be one flash line sequence. It would have its own rhythm. Let's say they flash on and off at this rate. It would have its own rhythm. That is a flash line. Now, you put 3 flash lines together, and you get a 3-dimensional system. So one dimension is one flash line sequence. Has its own rhythm, its own pulsation rate. The rhythm would be the pulsation rate of how energy moves in and out through that system. One dimension would also be the flash line sequence that the next one up is built on. The next one up would actually include that. As if you have one row of light bulbs, then the next row, that would be your dimension 2, you have 2 rows that equal the 1. The next one you'd have 3 rows that equal the 1. So dimensions, flash line sequences, build on each other. When you get, if you want to look at the mathematics of it, dimension 1 would have 12 light bulbs. Okay? And they would flash on and off at a slow rhythm, let's say. Dimension 2 would have 24 light bulbs, and they would flash on and off a little faster. Dimension 3 would have 36, and they'd flash on and off even faster. If you take that all the way up, the 15-dimensional scale, what you are getting is 5 sets of 3 flash line sequences, each sequentially moving faster. So dimension 1, 2, and 3 would have the slowest combined rhythm, flash line rhythm, which is the Partokai phasing rhythm. Dimensions 4, 5, and 6 would go together, and they would have the next faster. They'd be faster than the one below it, but not as fast as the next 3 above it. This is creating a framework in which 5 separate reality fields coexist in the same space. They're only separated by the rhythm of flash, of their scalar waves, and by the angle of intersection between those light bulb lines. There's a 90 degree shift, or a 90-degree angle of intersection between each of the 3, which translates into a 90-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin. Angular rotation of particle spin, mouthful. What that means is, by the time all this gets into manifest matter particles, flash line number 1, 2, and 3 are each going to create particles in the manifest world, subatomic particles and those kind of things, that have a specific angle of spin rotation. Now, science will tell us that subatomic particles and those kind of things spin. They move. They appear to move, have a spin rate, and they have a spin angle. Some are at different angles. We see in this reality field, what science can see in our microscope, are a very limited set of angular rotation of particle spins that fit within dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Between dimension 1 and 2, there's actually a 90-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin, which means a particle in dimension 1 be here with its axis like this. Okay? There would be a 90-degree shift in dimension 2 and a 90-degree shift in dimension 3. So they're all interfacing at a different angle. This is what allows light and sound units, scalar waves, standing waves, to bend in a way that creates like a lens effect. The lens effect creates a system of energy structures that we'll talk about soon. They're called Hoover bodies that are circular, actually elliptical, kind of like spherical elliptical spheres of energy that begin the process of taking these grids, these flashline sequences of Partokai, Partokai, and Particum and chelons, taking them from scalar wave form into the illusion of holographically projected matter. It's as if we're all sitting in a bubble of energy. A spherical bubble of energy is around us, and consciousness moves through, takes the content of what's inside of us, and projects it out on the screen, just like a projector in a movie theater would, except the screen is round, and it's all around us. It's like being in one of those dome theaters where everything around you is like coming at you, the image is at you. We are actually, our bodies are actually serving as the holographic projector vehicle. Our DNA is a holographic template. What's in there becomes literally what we see before our eyes, which means in broad terms, right now the fact that you're seeing me and that I'm seeing all of you implies that we're encoded in each other's DNA. Interesting concept, isn't it? It means you cannot walk any place and go anywhere and see anything that doesn't belong to you in your DNA. It may be something you don't want there, but you would not be able to see as an outside reality field something that was not in your holographic template. So we begin to understand, and it takes a while. There's a lot of pieces to this to understand really what in the world are we seeing when we walk around. You know, it helps for a while. I used to do this exercise, and it's not one that has a step 1, step 2, step 3. It's kind of like a conceptual one. I used to say, okay, when I was trying to digest this stuff and really get a handle on experiencing what that meant, I would sit in a room very quietly, I'd kind of slow my breathing right down and get toward like alpha brainwave state and mellow myself out and then say, all right, this is a hologram. Right now, everything I see before me is like a Kodak snapshot of what's in my DNA right there. Let me feel this reality. It takes a while, but if you play with that, you can do it anywhere. You can do it on the bus if you're good at blocking out distraction of sound and stuff around you. You start to get a feeling of, oh my God, I'm manufacturing this moment. There's a place where you can actually feel it to start to happen. If you play with that idea enough and get out of your own way mentally, we're saying, oh, I can't do that. Is that really true? If you stop the mental chatter and just focus on, I want to know my Kodak moment now. I want to feel it. I want to feel it. I'm making this. Wow, I'm creating this. And if it's a bad one, if it's a lousy moment, and you're having like really yucky stuff, say, my goodness, look how good I am at creating stuff. I'm creating a real mess right now. This is where you start to own your hologram, where you begin to realize life is not inflicting itself on you. You may be experiencing things you don't want to experience because your DNA template's running rampant right through you, and you don't realize you're creating it. It doesn't mean, oh, I must be terrible or really stupid because I'm creating this mess. It means there's something I need to fix in my DNA template if I want to make this better and I don't like what's out here. But there's a lot of people, most of the world, will look at the world and say, oh, I'm being victimized, the world's treating me terribly, it's treating me bad, it's your fault, you did it, you made it happen, you're victimizing me. As long as you're in that space, you will be a victim forever. I don't care if you're a Holocaust victim. You are still part of a mass drama that your DNA is carrying something that put you in that hologram. It doesn't mean you're bad or you deserve it. Just because you're the one manufacturing it at the moment doesn't mean, well, there, you deserve it. That's what a lot of people I've met actually do. There's some belief systems teach this stuff. Oh, well, it's your karma, so, don't bother me with it. I don't feel sorry for you. These can be the most obnoxious people because they don't have any compassion for anybody, as if they were doing any better, right? What did they do when something goes wrong in their world? Why me? What's wrong with my world? I guess it's my karma. What do I do with that? I don't know, right? They start to learn compassion by that. We need to realize that we have the ability to begin manifesting what we desire. But first we have to own everything we're creating. We are creating everything we see around us, every event we have, both personally and as a part, if we're a part of a mass drama. Like the mess we're moving into now with the war against terrorism. Oh boy. Talk about mass projections happening. We will first become empowered if no matter how lousy it is out there, if we can say, the part of this that I'm experiencing in my life, just for the fact that I'm a part of it, if I can recognize this is my hologram, the next question is, oh my God, what's in my DNA? And how do I get it out of there fast? Right? You don't beat up on yourself for not creating it the way you want it. That doesn't help either. If we can realize that the reason we've had such a hard time as a race creating what we would desire to see are because of the DNA distortions that chop up the different levels of consciousness. So we forgot how to communicate with the rest of ourselves. We're like creation machines running rampant. And on the subconscious level, we're creating a bunch of stuff that's creating misery for ourselves and for the planet. It's been going on for thousands of years. There's not any one person to blame, and blame is useless. If we can realize that this is the problem, we're a part of a mass problem. It's not just you that's messing up your hologram. We're all doing it really well. It shows you your creative potential, though. If you can create a hologram that's a mess, you can change your mind and create one that's nice. So that's where you start to own your power. Most of the world is perfectly willing to say, it's their fault, let's go blow them up. Let's blame them. Let's put them away. And the victim-victimizer game goes on and on and on, as it has for 25,000 years and more. The way to break that cycle is to realize whatever side of the victim-victimizer game you end up playing doesn't change the fact that you're in that game is part of your hologram, part of what you've manifested. So in beginning to understand the core things of the fact that we're in a dimensionalized universe system that means our consciousness is taking on the form of standing scalar waves that are adopting a primal order form. The order form is a very specific mathematical program, and it's a very simple one, really. A mathematical program that says there are 15 different rhythms of flash that will go together in groups of 3, and each 3 of those will intersect with each other at a different angle, a 90-degree angle of intersection. That is the format we're in. Yeah, we can put that on there now. Good. Go for it. What that creates, what those 15 different flash line sequence creates, and no, you're not going to see this if you go out into outer space. It's not hanging out there in the sky. Think about it. That's our hologram too. We're sending machines out into the hologram to see space, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a hologram. That gets mind-boggling after a while. It's like, who's creating that one? Source. No, but there is no God. We all started with a Big Bang. Yeah, right. Yeah. Science can go in loops. Now, this is a key and core diagram that we use throughout all of the Inner Templar and Planetary Templar teachings. It is a diagram that's meant to show you, to conceptualize for you, the relationship of a 15-dimensional system. The core structure, or the core template that the universe, the manifest universe, is built upon are sets of 15-dimensional systems. One set of 15-dimensional systems, one set of 15 dimensions is called a time matrix. Now, a time matrix is interesting because it doesn't just hang up there in the sky and we came from elsewhere and went into it to get into time. It's about expansion and contraction, the breathing rhythm of consciousness and of source. All of this is why I look at some of the teachings that have evolved or de-evolved down the road where God's out there someplace away from us. It is impossible because first you have source consciousness, God. It is intelligent, it thinks, it creates on purpose. It is an it because it is beyond form manifestation, which means it's beyond genderization. Genderization is an aspect of polarization rather than unification. God is not genderized. God is not physicalized, other than it's my millions and billions and eons of expressions as us and plants and animals and trees and galaxies. They are the body of God. But the consciousness of God exists first and foremost. The consciousness of God and the identity of God chose to create a hologram arena where it could get to know itself and experience all sorts of things. God is getting to know itself repeatedly over and over and always will through the myriad of manifestations that it is able to create. First you have source. That would be out here, okay? Going off the edge of the paper, limitless, boundless, but it's an energy field, okay? Consciousness field. Within that consciousness field, there are first levels of creation that are not quite dimensionalized yet. Before it goes into a standing pattern of light waves that flash off and on, it is first a standing pattern of sound, units, which are units of vibration that are actually pre-sound. It's called primal sound. There's an old saying that in the beginning was the word, was the sound, was the vibration. God first contracts part of its consciousness to form a standing sound vibration field. Within that primal sound vibration field, which are units of potential particle. They're particle of a form, but they're not the kind that flash on and off yet. They're in a perpetual off position or vibration position, so they don't oscillate and go into light yet. They are stationary sound, but they are also units of consciousness, of conscious awareness. That template of primal sound holds the identity levels of God that are called the Ascended Master levels. Now, every individual being, every individual anything that has come down into manifestation to experience the hologram. It implies that they have a family of consciousness or a set pattern of primal sound fields that they came through when they came out of God and came through that. You didn't go away from God. You went into God deeper. Remember, God is here. This is inside, like a little area of your mind that you put over here like a file. You know how the internet works and the computers work? We have an electromagnetic domain over here. Okay, you're going to use that as one field. Then you want to flip to another screen where you have other fields. Well, you could conceptualize it this way. You have the consciousness of Source. And a small piece of that consciousness of Source decided to create manifestation to know itself in that way. So it created the primal sound field and the ascended master levels of consciousness that are forever. They're eternal gestalts of consciousness. There are 24 primal ones of those that form time matrices. Now, the numbers have to do with the mathematics, the mathematical arrangement that was used, just like computer programs are built on mathematical arrangements. Most computer programs here are based on a base 10 math system, you know, the 10, 20, 30. The Source creation was based as a base 12 creation pattern, which means it's built on increments of 12, 12, 24, 36, 48, all the way up the scale. So we have primal sound fields. The primal sound fields are called the energy matrix. And they are in this diagram. The area is represented by here. So we have Source. The first contraction, where Source contracted its boundless self into a small area that it could begin to create within. Primal sound fields. There are 3 levels. The first contraction, which is the closest level to Source. This would be the last level you'd pass through, going out completely into at one with Source when you completely demanifest. The first is the ecstatic level. That's the first contraction. After you have God, then contraction within God. Next is the polaric level. Next contraction in. Next is the triadic level. Next contraction in. This is where the set, the beginning mathematical pattern for what becomes the trinities of dimensions in the light fields. This is where they're set in the primal sound fields. This is where the rhythms of what becomes Partakai phasing, the flashing on and off, is set within the primal sound fields. And these things aren't things that were just created once and then went away. These are perpetually refueled through pulses of consciousness that come from Source into those expansion and contraction levels. First it contracts into sound. Then Source expands within its contraction. And here, actually starts up here in the diagram. It starts up here. These are actually circles and circles and circles and circles. Here, dimensions 15, 14, and 13. They represent the first expansion within the contraction. So you have God, God contracts, and within its contraction, it made a little domain, it will expand its energy again. This is where the primal light fields exist. They're called the Kirishe, which we'll talk about later as we progress. The Kirishe primal light fields of dimensions 13, 14, and 15. These are where the beginning of Partakai phasing starts. These are the 3 original rhythms where these 3 levels of vibration start to turn on into oscillation. So these are the areas. They actually don't flash on and off yet. Here they're in their off state. Here they're perpetually in their on state. So in dimensions 13, 14, and 15, you have stationary primal light fields that never shut off. And as you expand out from them towards Source, then that's where they shut off in their primal sound. And then beyond that is full expansion into Source, where you're out of the manifestation framework completely. So you have the primal sound arena energy matrix. The primal light field, now dimension 13, 14, and 15 correspond to these levels. This becomes important when you begin working with the Ascendant Master issues and with the higher dimensional currents or the higher frequency currents. The ecstatic level, which is the closest level to Source, that's where you would have your most information. That is where you would have your highest level of consciousness. If you met somebody that was a D15 embodied Ascended Master, that means D15 doesn't go with here, it goes with here. All right, now there's a trick here that happens. These are expansions of these, but there's a process of this. If you were coming up the dimensional scale to ascend, if you want to ascend and step this way, you go through D13, 14, 15, full expansion, you have to contract back down to D13 to get back up to here, the acatic level. D13 goes with the acatic level. It is a slower oscillation, which means if you think in the terms of, okay, we're moving from sound into light, which would be oscillation. We're moving from no oscillation into oscillation. No oscillation, moving into oscillation. The first step, which would be the slowest rhythm that would start the process of moving into light, would be D13. And then the next step would be 14, which would move faster. The next step would be 15, which would move faster. So you actually have to expand all the way up to here and then slow down again to get back out, to do the contraction, to get back out into the primal sound fields. Now, they call these the primal light fields, and there are three primal frequency currents. You have the blue flame, the violet flame, and the gold flame. The flame refers to the primal standing light fields. D13, that corresponds with the acatic level of the sound matrix, is the blue flame light field. And it's out of that blue flame light field that the other two come. The gold is D14, and the violet is D15. Violet is actually a magenta pink color, but they call it the violet flame. The blue is actually a blue turquoisey color, very pale. They're very pale, like pastel-y colors. And D14, they call it the gold, but it's actually a very pale yellow. So these are the primal light fields. When we get into the end of Cathara 2 stuff, where we're getting into Vecca codes, we are going to be dealing with the mathematical programs that correspond to these and these in order to reprogram the parts of ourselves that correspond to these dimensional fields. I get excited when I think about it, because the currents that we're being trusted to learn to run again are awesome. The consciousness level that goes with them is awesome. It's a gift that's being brought back to this planet after many thousands of years of its absence. So I get excited when I talk about them. But we went from the Partakai units, flashing out and off little units of consciousness, form Partakai grids. Partakai grids form chelons. They all form standing scalar wave patterns. They have different flash line sequences that form dimensions. The dimensions group into sets of 3 that creates what's called a harmonic or a harmonic universe. Now, this is where the patterns for the 3-dimensional setup are mathematically held always. These are the primal fields that nothing can touch and mess up. When we get into here, from D13, 14, and 15, that's called harmonic universe 5. That is the universe of matter density that's called antimatter. This is the first stage, the light field, where form possibility begins to happen. How they have that wild light radiation gas. Everything starts in that form, and it's spherical. We all start, everything starts as sons of antimatter energy. That's our first beginning of individuation into form, from being a common form of primal sound and source. All right, so we have the antimatter. Density level starts here at harmonic universe 5. From there, a thought form of God passes into manifestation next, into what's called harmonic universe 4. That's composed of 3 flash line sequences, dimension 10, 11, and 12. The 12 is the highest frequency one, has the fastest flash line. The 11 is the next one, a little bit slower. And 10 is a little bit slower than that. That is another 3-dimensional reality field. That creates what is called prematter, liquid light, hydroplasm, the hydroplasmic field. It is when the gas field starts to slow down a little, just like when water vapor begins to turn back into water, pourable water. So down in here, in dimensions 10, 11, and 12, are the primal light field, primal prematter fields. The Christos liquid light field is considered fully this one, the D12 level. This is where your divine blueprint gets set, where before everything, no matter what it was, be it a bug, a planet, or a person, started out as a ball of flaming gas up in the primal light fields. It's now going to start to take on form differentiation according to whatever that original thought was, that when it was God up here, when it was still home up here, decided it wanted to be a so-and-so, so it put the pattern of the so-and-so here, then here. Now it's going to solidify the pattern. It's going to go from gas or water vapor type stuff down into liquid light. This is where you get the liquid light fields. Here is where your first imprint, your perfect form, is perpetually and always mathematically encoded within the universal template. Every being that passes into manifestation leaves its imprint here. That's its pre-matter divine blueprint. It's the divine blueprint because it's the part that came directly from the original intention. When the being was at one with Source, it made that intention. It was going to be in that form, in that time, space area. It was going to do this when it was there. Had that decision here. And it put itself through primal sound and primal light. And this was its first template, almost like a clay template. You could look at it as like liquid clay, where an impression was put there. And from that impression, the manifest form is going to densify. Now, this is a little bit, harmonic universe 4, pre-matter, is a little bit more dense in terms of matter than the gaseous state of the liquid light, of the gaseous light fields of the primal light fields in D13, 14, and 15 harmonic 5. Now, you have the template set here. The D12 level, which is connected to the D13 level, and remember D13 is the most powerful one of all because it's connected, light field, because it's connected to the Akkadic sound field, which is connected directly to Source. D12 can't be altered in the sense of destroying of a divine blueprint. It is always held in the connection with its D13 contraction point. There's a static that happens there that holds every divine blueprint perfect, no matter how much deviation may take place down here. But deviation can take place from 11.5 down, which means halfway up into the 12th dimension, you can start to have differentiation from what the original divine blueprint was. What this means too is when you're dealing with things like channeling and talking to beings that are out there somewhere that you don't know where they're coming from, a lot of people think just in the D4 astral plane is where the nasties are, but higher is always better. That's not true, because you can have messed up people in all sorts of different forms hanging out at D11.5. They're called D11 dark avatars. All right? So the universe is a much bigger place than we've remembered in a very long time. This structure, and beginning to understand the structure here, is the beginning of our wake-up call. So we begin to remember where we are. There's some responsibility that comes with this knowing as well, as far as a lot of people think, oh, well, you know, it's all safe and it's all perfect and nothing can ever harm me and the angel told me so and the angel's looking out for me. Good luck. Check the angel's resume, because you don't know where he's coming from. There's some nice angels out there. But the thing is, if you remember that you're an angel, you don't need an angel to fix it for you. You're supposed to be responsible for it yourself. This is one of the little tricks in the New Age movement that's happening. Oh, just give it to that angel or this one or that ascended master over there. They'll fix it for you, poor little pathetic thing. That's an insult, hate to tell you. You're avatars, and they're telling you you need like a D5 angel to fix it for you. This is part of the trickery that's going on because this structure has not been taught in so long. People don't know what they're talking to. They start channeling, they have things come in. You can't tell if it's good, bad, or awful. Until you understand what the structure is, where you fit into the structure, then you can start to, first of all, realize, I don't need something to run my life up there for me because I'm up there too. If something says, I'm an archangel and I'm better than you because I'm an archangel, you better listen to me. You say, excuse me, I'm an avatar. You know, like when you're going to grow up, you know. The intimidation factor that is so often used here to control and manipulate people by things coming in and communicating, you know, you can call them demons, you can call them angels, but saying, you are a poor, pathetic little race, you're a poor little sinner animal species down here. You know, God sends the angels to take care of you. We were the angels God sent to take care of the animals. We're being conned because our memory banks have been wiped out through the DNA. So as we learn these structures, we're going to reclaim the ability to look any angel, archangel, or other avatar in the face and say, excuse me, why are you trying to take my power? Don't you have your own? A being that asks you to worship it is sorely in need of stealing your power for some reason. And if it is truly a being that is of a high order, it has its own power. It doesn't need to steal yours. So it wouldn't want you to worship it. God doesn't want worship. God wants you to know your worth as a face of God and wants you to co-create in loving creation. That's what God wants. The books were changed by certain types of beings, we call them fallen angelics, who came in and decided, because they can't access the primal currents anymore, because they can't pull them into their bodies anymore, they've learned to energy vampire off other life forms and other systems. They try to get other beings to hand their power over. So they can literally tap into your primal life force currents, into your biofields, into your chakras, and start feeding themselves off your energy, which messes up your DNA even more. These are some of the tricks that are being run in the New Age movement. And if in the Templar workshop, we'll get heavily into what's really going on there. But even in this workshop, it's useful to know that you don't need to get caught up in any of that stuff if you realize this structure is the internal structure that you're built on, as well as the universe, and this is the series of energy circulation and consciousness circulation between God and anything manifest. It implies that you exist within God to begin with. God isn't away from you. You are within God. You can't be away from God. You can only be forgetting that you're a part of God. And you can be stuck in a body whose DNA isn't letting that cognition and frequency of consciousness to come through. You can open up that connection to God by opening up the primal life force currents, which are the currents of consciousness that God sends to feed the time matrix, to feed all of us here. You can open those in your body, and that's what Cathara healing is about, learning to bring that potential back to our race, which was the original potential of our divine blueprint. So we have up here the primal light fields, primal sound fields, primal light fields, pre-matter template fields with the divine blueprint at D12 level. This is the pre-matter. Now from pre-matter, matter starts to get a little more solid. Starts to crystallize a little more and forms, up here forms are neat in D12. Did you ever see the Terminator movie where they had that silver guy that looked like he was made out of mercury, like liquid mercury? Well, that is kind of what you can conceptualize that reality field as being like. We all have an image of ourselves where we all look the same, actually, at that level, as pale silver liquid light beings, our silver self, our Christos self. That self is always with us and around us. And when we begin to work with Cathara healing, we begin to open that frequency within our body. Later, once we heal our DNA templates, we can actually move this body energy and the particles it's composed of into that self and demanifest and remanifest someplace else. These are the potentials that we have. Now, when we get from pre-matter, liquid light,